Chapter 44. No one dared to disobey Qin Mo's words. Not just in the hotel owned by the Qin Group, but in the entire Jiang city, whatever he said, there would be people who would do it immediately. Soon, the waiter brought in 2 lobsters in bamboo cages. Each lobster was huge, and the pincers were still moving. Fu Jiu watched from the side, and she suddenly felt that the rest of the lobsters were even harder to swallow. This man was doing this on purpose. Couldn't they have a happy gay meetup? Co Qin. The waiter raised the bamboo cages respectfully so that their CEO could see the quality of the lobsters better. Qin Mo still had a cigarette between his slender fingers, and he glanced over there indifferently. Give it to your Lord Jiu. Your Lord Jiu. Fu Jiu held a big pincer in her mouth and took a big bite. Qin Mo looked at the young man's slightly depressed face. Under the shocked gazes of others, he reached out his hand and touched that fluffy head. With a faint smile, there was a deep sense of oppression. Eat slowly. If it's not enough, you can ask for more. Hearing that, Fu Jiu wiped the corner of her mouth decisively and smiled wickedly. I want to go pee first. Qin Mo took his hand back. His eyes were deep and beautiful. He looked at Fu Jiu for a few seconds before curling up his thin lips. We won't touch the lobsters, so you can keep them. Go. He didn't even give her a chance to pee? Fu Jiu narrowed her eyes. This man was really vengeful. But it was okay. She was eating his money anyway. She didn't know how to cook lobsters, but she could eat them. When she had an empty stomach, she could fight again. Fu Jiu loosened her fingers handsomely, stood up, and walked out of the greenhouse on the top floor lazily. But she didn't know what Coco and Fatty's expressions were like behind her. The second time. Today was the second time that their CO touched this guy's head. The 2 turned their heads at the same time, looking like they wanted to say something but didn't. Of course, Qin Mo knew that they were looking at him. He reached out and flicked the cigarette but, saying one word lightly. Captain, why are you so nice to this Spade Z? You didn't even treat me and Fatty this well. Coco finally said everything he wanted to say today. Qin Mo took the wet towel from the waiter and wiped his hands. You can eat if you want. Just watch the 2 live ones and start from 10. Coco paused because he thought about the scene carefully, and when he looked back, he realized that it was really scary. It seemed that the captain's gentle concern wasn't a good thing after all. But it was still a little strange. Captain had never touched anyone's head before. Not to mention touching her head, even that kind of smile just now was rare. Just as Coco was racking his brains, Fatty saw his CO stand up for some reason. He hurriedly swallowed the beef in his mouth and asked, Su Qin, where are you going? You guys continue eating. I'm going to take a look at that guy who's trying to escape. Qin Mo casually turned his side profile. His black hair fell down, revealing only a pair of bottomless eyes, which were as bright as an eagle in the sky. When he said this, his eyes were as cold as crushed ice. It was fine that he escaped once, but how could he let him escape again in front of him? The hotel's bathroom was built at the corner of every floor. It was made of high-quality incense, and the exterior decoration was basically the same as the hotel's, very luxurious. But Chapter 45. If she went to the women's restroom, she would be treated as a hooligan. If she went to the men's restroom, the men's restroom wasn't sealed. Unless she squatted, Fu Jiu tucked her bangs behind her head and furrowed her pretty eyebrows. I've decided I'll go to whichever restroom is empty. To make herself look less wretched, Fu Jiu put a smile on her face and put one hand in her pocket. She stood at the door handsomely. A girl just came out of the restroom. She looked up and saw a handsome young man. She blushed immediately. This guy? How could he be so handsome? But it was strange. Why was he standing here? The girl looked at Fu Jiu in confusion. Fu Jiu curled up her lips and pointed at the sink naturally. The faucet seems to be broken. I can't get any water out. Let me see. The girl lowered her head shyly. What should I do? I'm being hit on by this handsome young man. Should she act more reserved or more bold? The girl suppressed her excitement and reached out her hand. She said in a small voice, It's not broken. Everything here is sensitive. You can put your hand in and the water will come out. Oh, I see. Fu Jio looked like she suddenly realized something. She turned her face to the side and smiled at the girl. Thank you. No, you're welcome. His skin was even better up close, and his eyelashes were unbelievably long. How could there be such a good-looking person? The girl felt like her heart was about to jump out of her chest. She was about to ask for his WeChat number. Suddenly, a fair and slender hand reached out and placed itself between the two of them, grabbing onto the back of the pretty boy's collar. The girl was stunned. What was going on? Fu Jio was stunned as well. She looked up subconsciously at the person who grabbed her. It was a figure standing with his back to the light. It was Qin Mo. He was wearing a black suit jacket, and his shirt collar was half unbuttoned. That extremely handsome, mixed-race face exuded a noble and extraordinary aura. He was reserved and low-key, but there was a hint of danger in him. Now, he was grabbing her with one hand, and his other hand was casually in his pocket. He was staring at her with deep eyes. Fu Jio smiled calmly. Almighty Qin, what a coincidence. You're here to use the restroom too? Could it be that they're here to watch you flirt with girls? Qin Mo asked slowly. He had heard a few words just now and his lips turned cold. The faucet is broken? I can't believe you came up with such a lame pickup line excuse. This brat was simply exuding electricity all the time. Going to the toilet was the same. Did he like to tease people that much? It can't be helped. There's only a water tap here. Fu Jio wasn't embarrassed at all. She looked at the girl who was shocked by the scene and blinked her left eye. Her peach blossom eyes were very beautiful. The girl covered her mouth and looked at the two of them excitedly. Almighty Qin. Fu Jio tapped her thin lips with her fingertip and made an evil sound. Almighty Qin, so she's your fan. This time, before Fu Jio could finish, Qin Mo grabbed the back of his collar with force and dragged him into the men's washroom with an indifferent expression like he was carrying a kitten. Chapter 46. In the men's room, Qin Mo loosened his grip on her collar. What were you doing standing there like a fool? Fu Jio raised her eyebrows and denied it with a charming smile. When did I stand there like a fool? Wasn't I hitting on girls? Qin Mo snorted and stood to the side. He didn't wear a tie, and he even unbuttoned 2 buttons. He glanced at her and said in a low voice, Didn't you say you were going to pee? Why don't you come over? Go over? Fu Jio looked at the semi-concave urinal. How could she go over? She looked like a pretty boy, but she was still a girl. Even if she wanted to pee, she didn't need a urinal like this. Maybe it was because too much time had passed. Qin Mo also sensed something. He suddenly walked over to Fu Jio, lowered his head, and stared at her with sparkling eyes. His voice was very calm. I checked that gay meetups require us to drink and eat together. It seemed that Almighty Qin was seriously inviting her to pee with him. Gay meetups were really troublesome. But how could she pee? She couldn't take out that thing? Fu Jio tilted her head and thought for a moment. Suddenly, she looked up, pressed the man's chest, and pushed him against the wall. She raised her left hand and placed it on the pale white wall behind Qin Mo. That posture was as cool as flowing water. Then, she leaned over and breathed into Qin Mo's ear. In fact, during a gay meetup, you can even take off your partner's pants. Almighty Qin, do you want to try? Qin Mo's body stiffened at first, and when he realized what she said, his handsome face instantly turned frighteningly cold. He looked at the person in front of him and called out his name word by word, Fu Jio. Fu Jio was still smiling, and her right hand was about to help him unbutton his pants. Don't be shy, we're all men, so we have to go through this process. If we don't compare the size of that thing, how will we know who's better, right? Qin Mo couldn't take it anymore. He reached out and grabbed the wrist that made him clench his teeth. He pursed his lips tightly and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. Do you want to die? No, I'm just expressing my friendliness. Almighty Qin treated me to so many lobsters, so of course I have to return the favor. We're all brothers, so don't be so formal. Fu Jio was still blinking. She leaned over and got closer to him. That beautiful silhouette became clearer and clearer. Her skin was so fair and tender that even the fine hair could be seen. Her body temperature was so close that it was killing her. Chinamo looked at him viciously. He couldn't suppress the urge to strangle him. Sush. With a backhand, she pinned him to the wall and said in an extremely cold voice, "If you touch me again, I'll tear off your claws." Fu Jiu didn't mind being pressed down by him. She turned around and smiled brightly at him. "Almighty Qin is so pure. Don't tell me you're still a virgin." That lazy look and silver hair really did look like his cat. They both didn't know what was good for them. Chinamo took a deep breath, reached out his hand, and pinched the young man's chin. Every word he said was vicious. "Be good, don't force me to kill you. Do you understand?" Fu Jiu coaxed in a low voice. "Don't be angry. We're good friends." Chinamo sneered, pushed him away, and fixed his messy collar. "Don't use your flirting tone to flirt with me. Pee yourself and get back here." Chapter 47. Coco and Fatty, who were sitting in the top-floor greenhouse, didn't know what happened in the washroom. The two of them were still eating, and as they ate, they felt that CEO Qin had been in the washroom for too long. Fatty frowned and asked, "Did something happen?" Coco didn't care at all. What could happen? That guy only thinks about sleeping with Captain all day. Co. Fatty put down the knife and fork in his hand and pursed his lips forcefully behind him. The sensitive Coco immediately sensed the unusual coldness behind him. He raised his voice and changed his words quickly. He doesn't think that he can sleep with Captain whenever he wants. Our Captain likes girls, unlike him who's gay. Phew, luckily he didn't say the last sentence. If he continues like this, I'm worried that Captain will be turned gay by him. It was really thrilling, really thrilling. Coco reached out his hand and wiped his sweat. Chinmo's expression didn't warm up after he changed his words. On the contrary, the atmosphere in the private room seemed to freeze after he came in. It was unbelievably cold. Coco felt like he had fallen into an ice cellar. That coldness that made people shiver from the bottom of their hearts was indeed coming from CEO Qin. He turned his head and gave Fatty a look. Why did Captain's eyes become like this after one trip to the washroom? I feel like he wants to kill someone. Fatty shook his head. How would I know? Shut up. Be careful that CEO Qin has his eyes on you. Just as the two of them instinctively shrunk back, they heard their CEO's sinister and black-bellied voice ring out above their heads again. Give him 10 more lobsters, bigger ones. Not to mention Fatty and Coco, even the waiter standing next to them had a more look on his face. But they had to do whatever CEO Qin said. Even though this whole thing was very strange and not like CEO Qin's usual style. After all, it was quite uncomfortable to eat all those lobsters in one's stomach. After the waiter left, Fatty thought for a while and said, "So Qin, do you really think that Fu Jiu is spadesy? Why do I feel like he's a bit weird?" He's bent. That's how the bent world is. After Coco spoke up for Fu Jiu, he added, "But he seems to be completely different from the prodigal son of the Fu family that I remember. Wasn't he quite an introvert in the past?" Fatty was a shut-in and didn't know. Coco counted on his fingers. Infatuated, flaunting his wealth, no taste, just a typical nouveau riche. But he hasn't harmed anyone, it's just that attitude that makes people dislike him. Plus, he was gay, so he was ostracized. But he's also gay now, and he wants to sleep. When Fatty said the word sleep, he suddenly paused. Chinamo played with the silver lighter between his fingers, raising his eyebrows with a cold smile. What else does he want to sleep? Why aren't you continuing? Fatty really couldn't find an excuse. He wanted to cry but had no tears. Sleep with me, okay? You. Chinamo turned the plane, and his fingers paused. Then his voice became even colder, like an unsheathed ice, full of lethality. He can't sleep. His looks aren't up to par. Chapter 48. In order to save Fatty, Coco asked, "Captain, should we try that Fu Jiu?" "There's no need to try." Chinamo tilted his head and said lightly, without any emotion in his voice, "It's him." There was no other person who had this trait that made him want to strangle him to death just by looking at him. Fatty frowned. I really don't understand why Spadesy suddenly asked to meet him. Could it be that he was playing games to get closer to the CEO? Is that why he wants to meet him? After he finished speaking, Fatty deliberately looked at his CEO. Phew, fortunately, his CEO was rational and didn't seem to reject his idea. However, Coco seemed to have thought of something and suddenly sat up straight. No, it's not to get closer to the captain. If it was such a simple reason, he wouldn't have rejected the captain when he added him. Isn't our team recruiting new people recently? Many companies want to send people to the corporation, but there seems to be a problem with Madame Fu's side. All the players have been poached, and now she can't even submit the most basic list. If this continues, her company will definitely go bankrupt. You're saying that Spadesy wants to meet the CEO because of this? Fatty said and glanced at Chinemo again. But this time, he didn't know if it was his illusion, but the CEO's lighter in his hand actually paused for a moment. However, Chinemo didn't say anything. He lifted his jade-like fingers and took the wine glass from the table. He swirled it back and forth twice. His deep eyes were a little cold. So the reason he wanted to see him was because of this. After Fujio finished filling the tub, she found that there were 10 more crayfish in front of her seat. In fact, the table they were eating at wasn't small. It was the kind of luxurious presidential table that could seat 12 people. Now the entire table was filled with crayfish. Almighty Chin and the others' food only took up a little bit of space. Was he trying to make her die from overeating? Fujio looked up at Chinemo, feeling very melancholy. Why didn't the strategy guide teach the Almighty that he should be reserved and tolerant when meeting a game friend for the first time? Even if you're rich, you shouldn't waste it like this. This isn't a crayfish that costs 10 renminbi. This is an Australian crayfish. When the man saw the silver-haired young man grumble gloomily as if he was complaining about something, he chuckled softly. Then, he took out a cigarette and bit it between his thin lips. He tilted his head and lit it. Then he raised his chin. It's all yours. Okay. Fujio also smiled. It was a little evil. So what if he ate? He wasn't the one paying anyway. However, why did Almighty Chin look even colder than before? She didn't really take off his pants, so he didn't have to sneer at her, right? Could it be that something had happened while she was gone? Fujio pondered for a while but couldn't figure out anything. She ate a lot of lobsters and was very full, but she was still satisfied. As long as she could meet him once, she wouldn't have to disguise herself when she participated in the competition. She wouldn't have to worry about Chinemo checking on her at all times. To be honest, this was the first time she had encountered such a difficult opponent. He even deduced that she liked to eat lollipops. If he continued to investigate, who knew what he might find out? Right now, she couldn't afford to be investigated by Chinemo. Chapter 49. After eating the last pincer, Fujio felt it was time to leave. She was about to say goodbye to Almighty Chin. Thank you for the lobster, see you next time. But she heard Chinemo ask with a faint smile, done eating? Yeah, I'm done. Fujio nodded. She was in a good mood. Not bad. Almighty Chin had learned how to make small talk with people. It turned out that the gay meetup strategy was useful. Chinemo chuckled. A cold glint flashed across his eyes when he saw how lazy he was. He lifted his finger. The waiter immediately handed over the menu with both hands. Chinemo glanced at the waiter. Go get the bill. The waiter was confused. Didn't the CEO need to pay for meals? Coco and Fatty didn't understand what was going on either. But they heard their CEO say calmly, give it to your Lord Gio. He's treating us today. Coco, Fatty, Fujio, even the waiter, Fujio's reaction was the most direct. Her eyes, which were about to flirt with Chinemo, twitched. When did this meal become her treat? And wasn't this hotel owned by Chin? Almighty, I remember this is your family's business. Are you sure you want me to treat you? Where's your demeanor? Fujio raised her eyebrows. Coco and Fatty were a little embarrassed by their conversation. After all, their CEO had never asked anyone to treat them, not to mention at his own hotel. The waiters standing at the side also looked at each other and didn't move forward. Chinamo looked at Fujio's beautiful peach blossom eyes and said faintly, "I only treat people like this when I'm close to them." Fujio, this man was doing it on purpose. He was using her words to shut her up. She had only breathed into his ear. How could he treat her like this? She only had 5,000 yuan on her, and it was earned from playing games. At most, she could pay for 5 lobsters. How did the gay meetup course teach people? Almighty Qin, if you keep being so vengeful, you won't be able to get a girlfriend, let alone a good friend. What? You don't want to treat me? Qin Emo raised the teacup in his hand. He didn't drink it. Through the mist, his eyes shone. Didn't you say we have a good relationship? Fujio leaned back and said straightforwardly, "It's not that I don't want to, but I don't have the money." You don't have money? Coco's tone was a little high as if he didn't believe it at all. How is that possible? Fujio laughed. Why not? Someone thought I was embarrassing and was afraid of offending young Master Qin, so he removed my name from the Fu family. You should know about this. Coco did know about it. After all, his family had some business dealings with the Fu family. This matter caused quite a stir. His dad also said that no matter how bad Fujio was, his old man shouldn't have treated the one he was raising outside as his own. He even cut off Fujio and his mother's financial support. That third was even worse. He took the opportunity to poach people. He was basically forcing He Honghua to her death. For a moment, Coco didn't know what to say. He turned his head and looked at his Su. But before Qin Mo could speak. Chapter 50. In an instant, the temperature in the room dropped by several degrees. The waiters stood on the side, their fingers frozen, and their eyes were filled with unspeakable shock. Someone actually dared to make such a gesture in front of their Su. And what did he say? Using his body? It couldn't be what they thought it was. But looking at that young Master Fu's posture, it was indeed the Su. It was hard for them not to think in that direction. Especially when his pale lips seemed to be only a centimeter away from their CEO's ear. If he got any closer, he would probably kiss him? The CEO's aura was obviously much colder. But that young master didn't seem to notice it. The mole under his eye shone with a bewitching luster. What? You don't like me using my body? Then let me kiss you. Fujio said happily, and it seemed like she was about to take action. Qin Mo's eyes suddenly turned cold. He reached out one hand and grabbed his wrist tightly, pressing Fujio down on the table. That look in his eyes showed that he really wanted to strangle Fujio. Then, he forcefully pulled out Fujio's wallet from her school uniform pocket and threw it into the waiter's hands. His voice was as cold as a cold pond in the snow. Swipe all the cards for him. At this moment, no waiters dared to disobey Qin Mo's orders. Everyone could see that their CEO's cold and indifferent image was about to be blown away by this person's teasing. Fujio still wanted to keep some of her assets, so she tried to negotiate with Qin Mo. Can you leave me 1,000 for my living expenses? Qin Mo didn't listen to Fujio at all. He pressed him down with that posture and looked down at him. Qin Mo had to restrain himself from breaking this guy's wrist. Who knew that this guy would learn to be obedient? He maintained that posture and looked at him with a smile. His warm breath seemed to fall on the back of his hand. He couldn't tell why. Qin Mo felt that Fujio was like his cat. Even her hair was soft, and it scratched his palm again and again. People who didn't know better would think that the young man was acting coquettishly. But in fact, this guy was just pretending. Even if they were to play games together in the future, he would change this guy's bad habit of flirting. Where did he learn to flirt with anyone he saw? Qin Mo narrowed his eyes slightly. He put out the cigarette in the ashtray with one hand and pinned Fujio down with the other. He was still wearing a suit jacket, and a lock of black hair fell down with his movements. He looked very masculine, not only in his posture, but also in his fierce eyes. Qin Mo's current state was enough to make one's legs go weak. No wonder his fans called him Almighty Qin. Too handsome. So cool. Unfortunately, Fujio wasn't in the mood to appreciate the Almighty's beauty. After all, her card was about to be used up, and this was simply bad news for a hacker who had just saved some money for her computer. President Qin. The waiter walked over with sweat on his forehead and raised the card with both hands. A total of 26,580 yuan has been spent. Lord Jio's card only has 5,000 yuan, which has been used up. Qin Mo nodded faintly. Fu Jio thought that this was the end of it. After all, the money in her card was gone. What else could she do? Chapter 51. Tab. People who came here to eat never tabulated, especially people of their age and circle. They loved to compare who was more generous. Tabulating when they went out to eat? How shabby was that? Coco lowered his head and bit his finger. The CEO's plan was too evil. He was obviously trying to help Fu Jio become famous in the circle. In the future, no matter where Fu Jio went, this matter would be brought up. Fu Jio didn't care about her reputation, but she cared about money. Almighty Qin, didn't the guide tell you that your friend doesn't have any money? Shouldn't you make up for the difference? Qin Mo glanced at him faintly. That's the normal process of a gay meetup. Obviously, that doesn't suit you. In order to prevent you from having the ridiculous idea of paying with your body, it's better for you to hand over the money. Fu Jio, this lobster meal was really a loss. In order to avoid further losses, Fu Jio, who originally didn't want to bring the 2 live lobsters home, decided to carry them back even if she had to carry them. This was her treat, and she still owed him 30,000 yuan. But spending money to avoid disaster, and after this meal, she wouldn't have to worry about being investigated again. Do you want to go back yourself, or do you want me to give you a ride? Qin Mo glanced at the lobsters in the young man's arms, and he seemed to think that the young man looked like his cat that had just been drenched in the rain. Qin Mo knew that the young man only looked pitiful, but his claws were still hard, but he still asked in a low voice. After all, the Qin family's etiquette and upbringing were there. Qin Mo also thought of another point. If this guy asked for anything in the car, as long as it wasn't too much, he would agree. After all, a big part of the reason why he met Spadesy this time was to ask him to join his team. Fu Jio didn't stand on ceremony. She flipped her silver hair and curled up the corner of her mouth. You give me a ride. I don't even have enough money to take a taxi. This place is a bit far from my house, and it's not practical to skateboard back. Okay. Qin Mo reached out and opened the car door. His expression was very calm, and he still looked cold and noble. At this time, the atmosphere of a normal gay meetup began. Fatty and Coco always thought that it wasn't a gay meetup. It was simply a knife and sword fight. Fatty was still driving. There was music in the car. Fu Jio sat on the left side of Qin Mo. There was some distance between them, but they didn't talk much. Coco wasn't used to this, and he couldn't help but ask, Fu Jio, what about your mom's company? Is it really going to close down? Why did it close down? Fu Jio retracted her gaze from the night outside the window. Her eyes were deep. Coco licked his lips. I heard that most of the contestants in your mom's company have been poached away, and now they can't form a team. If you don't make adjustments, you'll be disqualified. Once the investors pull out, your mom's company won't be able to hold on. There is indeed such a thing. Fu Jio smiled, and a bone-chilling coldness appeared in her eyes. Who did you hear this from? That 3 outside? Or that illegitimate child of the Fu family? No matter who you heard it from, my mother's company will not collapse. Even if it collapses, it should be someone else. Coco didn't expect that the person who had been so unrestrained in the hotel just a moment ago would be filled with such a strong sense of oppression. Chapter 52. Qin Mo also looked over at Fu Jio. That pair of deep eyes made it impossible to see through his emotions. President Qin, we've arrived at the Fu mansion. Fatty stopped the car. Qin Mo glanced at Fu Jio again. Fu Jio was still holding 2 live lobsters in her arms. She raised her head and smiled at him. Then I'm leaving. Thank you, Almighty Qin, for sending me back. See you in the game later? The 2 of them were sitting together. As long as Qin Mo tilted his head, he could see that innocent face. He could even see the fine hairs on his cheeks. Seeing him like this, Qin Mo didn't care so much about his bad mood. That's all? You're not going to say anything else? Anything else? Drive slowly. Send me a WeChat message when you get home. I'll call you for a dungeon raid. Fu Jiu leaned forward and brushed the black hair in front of Almighty Qin's forehead with her fingers. If the Almighty is willing to fight in person, they will definitely offer a higher price. Originally, Qin Mo wanted to say, if you're here because of your family's company, I can help you solve it. But he didn't expect that this guy would only be quiet for a minute before he started to court death here again. Qin Mo took a deep breath, narrowing his eyes. His chest rose and fell and his voice was low. The words seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. Scram. Angry again? Fu Jiu glared at him and then burst into laughter. She raised her hands and rubbed Qin Mo's hair. Almighty, don't be so cool all the time. Be more amiable. After all, this is the first time we've met. Don't leave on bad terms. Yeah, you look better this way. Coco and Fatty sat in front of the car, not daring to look back. What was that brat doing? Rub the CEO, Captain's head. Have you ever heard of plucking feathers from a tiger's head? This was the same logic. The CEO probably wanted to tear him into pieces this time. Qin Mo had never been rubbed on the head before. His fingers loosened, and tightened again. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He pushed open the car door and threw the smiling young man out. Drive. 2 very cold words, without a trace of warmth. Fatty's body trembled. Without saying a word, he immediately stepped on the accelerator. He was afraid that if he stayed any longer, his CEO wouldn't be able to control himself and fight with Spadesy. Fu Jiu, on the other hand, was very happy. She curled her thin lips and waved at the rearview mirror with a bright smile. Almighty Qin, who was dazzled by such a smile, snorted coldly and turned his head away. Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows. Avoid her? But she still had ways to harass him. He lowered his head and sent a WeChat message over. Guru, remember to log on when you get home. Let old driver carry you through the dungeon. Qin Mo held his chin and swiped open the message. He snorted coldly. Do I need you to carry me to clear the dungeon? Then you take me. It's all the same. After Fu Jiu finished playing, she added a smiley face. It's more fun to play games with friends. This time, Qin Mo didn't reject her. He replied indifferently, got it. Was that a yes? Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows. It seemed like the Almighty wasn't completely inhumane. If Almighty Qin really wanted to clear a dungeon with her, in that case, the price of the order would go up. Group photos and the like were also included in the list. It wasn't easy to get the Almighty to help clear a dungeon. She wouldn't accept any normal price. She had to change it to VIP treatment. Not bad, not bad. There were benefits to having a gay meetup. Chapter 53. Thinking of this, Fu Jiu's gloominess was swept away, and even the lobster in her arms didn't look so disgusting anymore. How much money the Almighty had cheated her today, she would earn it back from him. 2 words. Fairness. At this moment, Qin Mo's deep eyes were still looking at the few WeChat messages on his phone. His expression was complicated and hard to understand. He thought the young man would talk about something, but the young man didn't mention a word. Coco looked back at him and said hesitantly, it seems like Fu Jiu didn't come to find Captain because of his family. But it's hard to accept that he changed so much all of a sudden. Was he acting in order to get close to Captain in the past? Maybe he knew that Captain liked well-behaved girls before, and now that he doesn't need to act anymore, he released himself? Qin Mo glanced at the blinking WeChat profile picture again, and his expression was indifferent. Acting? Is this something a stupid person like him can come up with? Hearing that, Coco's mouth twitched. Captain, although Fu Jiu wasn't that smart before, he was very smart now. Maybe he was really acting. But if he was acting, there was no need to tell them that he was Spadesy. Thinking about it this way, he felt that he overestimated Spadesy's ability to read people's expressions. If he really knew how to act, Fu Jiu wouldn't have flirted with the CEO so much that he wanted to kill him. Then why did he change so much? Was it because his family had changed? Coco was very confused. As long as he keeps acting like this, we don't need to care about him. Chin Mo tilted his head and closed his eyes, as if he was taking a nap. His black hair was messy because he had just been rubbed, but he still felt that there was something on his head, so he uncomfortably rubbed it with his fingers. Coco and Fatty froze when they heard that. Keep acting like this? What kind of flirting with the Coco lowered his head and bit the rabbit's ear. Captain was really indulging that spade Z. At night, Chen Xiaodong was still standing at the door, looking around on his tiptoes. He was very anxious, but young master didn't reply to his messages. He only said, "He already knows now." Then he hung up. Chen Xiaodong's heart skipped a beat. He already knows now. What did that mean? Did it mean that young master already knew that young master wanted to sleep with him? Wouldn't the young master never be able to return? Chen Xiaodong's eyes widened as he stood up. He had to think of something. How about breaking into the military compound? The Qin family seemed to be in there. Just as Chen Xiaodong was hopping with worry, Fu Jiu patted him on the shoulder from behind. "What are you doing standing here in the middle of the night?" "Young master." Chen Xiaodong's eyes lit up. "Young master who came back alive. Young master, have you been beaten up somewhere? Don't worry, just tell me, I'll go get the medicine for you." Fu Jiu listened to his explanation and rubbed her temples. "Why do you always want me to get beaten up? Look carefully, I don't have any injuries on my body." Only then did Chen Xiaodong notice that there was indeed nothing wrong with his young master. Instead, that handsome face was tinged with a layer of red, as if he had eaten to his heart's content. He was even holding 2 live Australian lobsters in his arms. Chapter 54. Jiang City wasn't near the sea, so a pair of Australian lobsters like this would be worth a lot of money even if they were dead, let alone alive. Didn't young master run out of money recently? How did he get these things? Almighty Qin gave them to me. After Fu Jiu said that, she threw the lobster into his arms. "Find a bucket and let Aunt Lin keep it. Cook it when my mom comes back." "Qin." Young master Qin gave him lobsters. Chen Xiaodong's eyes widened, and he suddenly felt that the thing in his hands was as heavy as gold. Was the relationship between young master and young master Qin good enough for young master Qin to give him a gift? This was something he had never seen before in his life. One had to know that when young master first confessed to young master Qin almost asked someone to crush young master with one hand. Now he was giving young master a gift. But giving lobsters as a gift, wasn't that a little too weird? Almighty Qin's world wasn't something mortals like them could understand. "Wait, young master, where are you going?" Chen Xiaodong couldn't help but ask when he saw Fu Jiu going upstairs. Before Fu Jiu closed the door, she only said one thing to him: "Get on the game and flirt with the Almighty." Chen Xiaodong and Aunt Lin, who had just walked out, both felt that their young master was a little obsessed recently. He actually began to fight with the computer without eating or sleeping for a man. But they knew their young master's skills better than anyone else, and he didn't even know how to operate his character in the game. Ever since Madame started her company, they knew that their young master was terrible at playing with netizens. Such a young master actually took the opportunity to hook up with Almighty Qin in the game. One had to admit that sometimes, when people got lucky, it was quite shocking. Aunt Lin didn't cook those 2 lobsters. She didn't dare to touch them when she heard that they were gifts from young master Qin. She carefully got a small wooden bucket, put some seaweed in it, and sent it upstairs for her young master to keep as a pet. When Fu Jiu came out of the shower, the first thing she saw were the 2 lobsters baring their fangs at her. She casually picked one up and looked around. Then, she took a photo with her phone and sent it to Qin Mo. "I'm using my new pet lobster to summon my teammate, Almighty Qin." The photo was taken with Fu Jiu's body turned sideways. She didn't even notice that when the photo was posted, her collarbone could be vaguely seen through her loose pajamas. Qin Mo unlocked his phone and glanced at the photo. His gaze swept over the youngster's fair and delicate collarbone. His gaze paused, and he frowned as he replied, his voice a little cold. "Don't send such a photo in the future." "Such a picture? What was wrong with the photo she sent?" Fu Jiu looked at the thing in her hand. "Wasn't it just a lobster?" And he, Almighty Chin, personally gave it to her. Forget it. Talking was more important. Are you playing online? Fu Jiao sent a voice message while turning on the computer case. When Chin Mo heard it, the sound was very clear. Was this guy using such a lousy machine to play games? Wait for me at the Bridge of Helplessness. Of course, Fu Jiao wouldn't refuse. She quickly logged into her account and teleported her character to the side of the Bridge of Helplessness. Ding. Something seemed to have been sent over. Your friend Chin Mo has gifted you 99,999 game gold coins. Do you accept? This wasn't the end of it. Another message came over right after. Chapter 55. Your friend Chin Mo has sent you another 99,999 game coins. Do you want to accept it? 99,999 game coins? If converted into RMB, it would be 9,999 yuan. Not to mention those precious rainbow dress diamonds, which could not be bought normally. What was the Almighty doing? Even a cool person like Lord Jiao couldn't figure out what the other party was thinking. Accept. Chin Mo sent a total of 6 words. Gift for the gay meetup. Fu Jiao, Almighty, where on earth did you find the tutorial for the gay meetup? Why did it sound like a betrothal gift? Who would give money directly to their friends in the game? Fu Jiao didn't know if she was lucky or unlucky to have met such a rich and black-bellied guy. After thinking about it, she still didn't accept it. But she wanted all the diamonds. She could grind them up and make weapons for the 2 of them. Aren't you short of money? Almighty Chin was indeed the Almighty Chin who had shaken Sijio City. Every time he spoke, he was so cold and straightforward. Fu Jiao unwrapped a lollipop and put it in her mouth. She curled up her lips and said, I am short of money, but Almighty, if you give it like this, I will think that you want to keep me. Chin Mo's fingers tightened on the mouse, and he laughed, very coldly. Give me back the diamonds you just accepted. That's useful. Fu Jiao held the lollipop in her mouth, crossed her long legs, and quickly replied, Almighty Chin, I'm telling you the truth because we are brothers. You can't be too stingy, especially a man. How can you take back something you've given? I just accepted a job, so let's go play the game. Be good. Chin Mo's deep eyes stared at the words on the LCD screen, especially the word, be good. His whole body emitted a cold and oppressive aura, which made Secretary Liang, who came to report, take a step back. What's wrong with this? He suddenly felt like he was going to kill someone. He saw Hiseo raise his hand and fiercely type on the keyboard. Shut up, play the game. Chin Mo never expected this guy to spit out any ivory when he spoke. It was all because he was Spade Z. He wouldn't kill him. Chin Mo told himself that again. Fu Jiao sent another head-scratching emoji. Diamonds can be used to make weapons. What do you want? Gradually, Chin Mo got used to his way of speaking. He replied coldly, whatever. Then I'll do my own research when the time comes. With that, Fu Jiao hooked her earphones. I'm inviting you into the team. All right. The moment he finished speaking, the scenery in the game changed. Without the soft and delicate flowing water, peach blossoms shone brightly. Instead, he arrived at an ancient tomb. There were 4 other players at the entrance of the tomb. Some of the players had approached Spade Z for business before. Knowing Spade Z's fighting ability, he was about to open the door. Spade Z said that his friend was coming to play with them. In the beginning, they felt that if there were too many people, it wouldn't be worth it to clear the ancient tomb. After all, they would have to split the loot. If someone didn't play well, they might not be able to complete the first clear. But when they saw the friend Spade Z was talking about, one by one, they all froze. Chin Chin Chin. Almighty Chin. How was this possible? It must be another fake version using Almighty Chin's name to swindle customers. Chapter 56. The 4 players looked at each other at the same time, and then looked at Chin Mo in horror. Max level, complete data. What was even more dazzling was his shining PK ranking. Number 1. This was definitely Almighty Chin. They saw Almighty Chin. Almighty Qin in real life. Petrified, excited, and excited. It was impossible to describe the feelings of these four players. Sitting in the internet cafe, the fingers holding the mouse were trembling. That was Almighty Qin. The Almighty Qin who never played online games privately, but could make millions of fans go crazy over an esports game live broadcast. Were they really not dreaming? Whatever, let's kill ourselves first before entering the game. Only by dying once would they believe this fact. Why aren't you moving? Let's start. Fujio was still typing, but in the blink of an eye, she saw that the four players in front of her were all dead. What was going on? Fujio paused for a moment and suddenly seemed to realize something. Is it because of you? Fujio sent this message in a private message. Qin Mo used one hand to reply. I haven't played many amateur online games. I only play in professional leagues, so I'm not sure. You haven't come in to clear a dungeon? Fujio was shocked. Qin Mo replied indifferently, I haven't done it privately, but 3 times when the company needs it for publicity. According to Fujio's understanding of the Almighty, his words meant that he had only cleared a dungeon 3 times since he started playing games, and each time it was for a live broadcast. No wonder they died, they were all scared by you, Almighty. Fujio raised her eyebrows and typed quickly. Then, aren't you lonely when you play games? Great, I'm here and I'll make you rich. Qin Mo didn't care about him at all. This guy was the type of person who would take advantage of others, and the more he talked to him, the more attractive he would be. It was best to ignore him. But surprisingly, he was a little more pleasing to the eye than the others. With this thought, Qin Mo tilted his head and lit a cigarette. He sat on the big leather chair, and the stars behind him filled the sky. The lights of the whole city seemed to become his background at that moment. Secretary Liang bent down to pass the coffee to him. He was wearing pure white gloves. Their CEO had always been a neat freak, and he couldn't ignore the details. He really wanted to look at the screen and see who CEO was talking to. Usually, at this time, the CEO would be reading the financial news. Why would he be playing games? Who was on the other side of the computer? Last time, he had asked the president to stop the meeting halfway. This time, the CEO adjusted the office hours. She was definitely a little demon. Otherwise, why would the CEO play games instead of doing his job? However, he was very curious about who this little demon was. It was as if there was a claw scratching at his heart. However, the CEO didn't want him to know anything. How was he going to report this to his boss and madam? Secretary Liang. Qin Mo extinguished his cigarette and lifted his coffee. He looked at him coldly. Remember who you belong to. Now, close the door and get out. Secretary Liang shuddered. He braced himself and answered, yes. Why was the CEO's aura even more oppressive than the boss's? Wasn't he still a student? No wonder the CEO's fans called him Almighty Qin. He was the reincarnation of a tyrant. Speaking of which, for someone to be so unafraid of the CEO, he was really brave. Chapter 57. On the other side, Secretary Liang was still making false reports. On the other side, the entire Hero server exploded. No one was playing the game anymore. Almost the entire world was flooded with messages. Holy sh*t, I can't believe I'm seeing Almighty Qin in the game in my lifetime. He's not invisible, it can't be true. Our fan group didn't receive any news from the team's live broadcast. How could Almighty Qin be playing? Impossible. It's true. A lot of people saw it. Almighty Qin is still playing dungeons. The one above, stop dreaming. Almighty Qin plays dungeons? Almighty Qin only plays PK in the league. Go and see for yourself if you don't believe me. Almighty Qin is with a newbie. It looks like they're having an ambiguous relationship. Ambiguous relationship. Very ambiguous. When the Supreme Alliance on the top floor heard the news that their CEO was playing dungeons, they also entered the game. Now they were looking at each other in dismay. Then, they all looked at Coco. The young cat-like streamer bit the rabbit's ear and said, "Don't ask me, I don't know either." "Captain, how did you get hooked up with Spade Z to play dungeons? Who said that dungeons are boring? Do you know that the game system is about to crash as soon as you show up? There were over 10 million online surfing in the whole server, and the technicians were going crazy, okay? The agent of the Supreme Alliance also received the news at the first moment. At that time, a CEO of a live broadcast company told him. He smiled gently and said in a businesslike tone, "Our Xiao Qin never plays dungeons. You must have mistaken him for someone else." The CEO simply handed him the notebook. The agent felt a chill down his spine. "Wait, I need to make a call first." He took a deep breath before he hung up the phone, but he didn't expect that after he dialed the number, To Qin's first words were, "I'm playing dungeons. If you have something to say, talk to me tomorrow. Don't hang around outside all the time, go back to the company and work. I'm hanging up." His voice was cold and the phone was hung up. It was indeed their young Master Qin style. "But, Xiao, I'm your agent. I should be the one controlling you, not the other way around. The point is, why are you really playing dungeons? What if it's on the headlines tomorrow?" "Wait, headlines?" The agent's eyes turned, and he immediately called the PR team. "Write a long article now, saying that CEO Qin is playing dungeons to find new blood for the team." What ambiguous relationship? What's with the ambiguous relationship? Someone said that Chairman Qin is playing this game for a newbie. That newbie is helping Chairman Qin take quests and earn money. Every time he completes a first kill, he gets 5,000 yuan, and he gets to take a photo with Chairman Qin. We're all playing now, trying to get in line. The manager's chest heaved up and down. Who could tell him what was wrong with the Sil? In the past, he had to beg the CEO to allow him to enter the game and do a live stream. All this was on the premise that he did not have to attend a meeting, so he had nothing to do and was in a good mood. Their boss Qin had always walked the path of an altar that said, "Like me or not, I'm just that cold." How could he help someone get a first clear for just $5,000? "President, if money could move you, why didn't you tell me earlier?" The agent was extremely distressed. Her expression immediately changed as she asked, "Which area is O Qin in?" What? The agent snorted coldly. "I want to hire him to help me clear the dungeons too." Chapter 58. Fu Jiu also realized that there were a lot of onlookers as she was playing. And those people all had the same golden title above their heads as Almighty Qin. Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows, sucked on her lollipop, and smiled wickedly. She sent a message to Qin Mo, "Almighty Qin, you are so popular. All the professional teams in the country are here because of you." Qin Mo glanced at the screen and didn't care at all. "Don't look at others, just focus on the monster you want to kill." "So cold?" Fu Jiu flicked her finger and sent a big move over. All the bosses were killed. The first kill was completed. Once again, Spade Z and Qin Mo's names appeared high up on the server's bulletin board. It was already late at night, but the netizens' enthusiasm didn't die down at all. They were all staring at the screen. Whether it was the people in the internet cafes or the people in the professional leagues. They crazily bought orders again and again, hoping that Spade Z would take their orders. Fu Jiu saw this scene and her eyes flashed. She smiled wickedly and sent a message. "Last order tonight, the highest bidder wins." Last order? The agent thought to himself. It wasn't easy to get a chance to enslave the CEO, and he wouldn't give it to anyone else. So he made a decisive bid. He raised the price to 10,000 in one go. There was never a lack of rich people in the game. Who didn't want to be in close contact with their idol? It was just money. In an instant, the game's page was filled with bids. The price went from 5,000 to 50,000. Fu Jiu crossed her long legs, and her silver hair stood up because she was wearing headphones. She watched the price go up, and she accidentally sent the truth to Qin. "Almighty, why do I feel like you are auctioning off your first time? Ha, Fu Jiu." Even through the screen, Fu Jiu could feel the viciousness of the man's clenching teeth. "If you don't shut up, I'll kick you out with your computer." Qin Mo's eyes were gloomy, and his slender fingers held the mouse tightly. He tried his best to suppress the anger in his heart, but he couldn't hold it in anymore and still sent the message. This was what Secretary Liang saw when he came in. She glanced over at Chin Mo before retreating quickly. So scary. The demonized He only went out to make 2 phone calls and report the information. How did the CEO's eyes become so bloodthirsty? He felt that no matter who went in now, the CEO would be able to crush that person's neck. So scary. People in love can be so unreasonable. A second ago, he was still smiling, and the next second, he was about to kill. Unable to hold it in any longer, Secretary Liang made another call. Hello, madam? Yes, it's me. I think the CEO quarreled with the other party. Yes, that's right, it's the kind of quarrel between a couple. In fact, after Fujio sent that message, she also felt that it was inappropriate. After all, she could earn so much money because of Almighty Chin. After some thought, he sent another line of words. Don't worry, if there's an auction for your first time, I'll definitely be the first to bid. I won't let them snatch it away. Even though they were chatting privately, Chin Mo wanted to drag this guy out from the computer and crush his mouth. Apart from being good at playing games, this guy was basically asking people to kill him at any moment. Chapter 59. Chin Mo narrowed his eyes fiercely, and his eyes were deep and cold. Aren't you going to start the dungeon? Do you want me to break your claws? Sigh, the Almighty is acting like a tsundere again. Fujio stretched lazily. It was better not to flirt too much, or it would cause a rebound effect. With this thought in mind, Fujio reached out her hand with the lollipop in her mouth. She clicked the mouse and quickly invited the highest bidder, I'm the Almighty's agent, into the game dungeon. I'm the Almighty's agent? What a strange nickname. Fujio sent a private message to Chin Mo while locating him. Chin Mo glanced at the player, and a cold glint flashed across his deep, dark eyes. The agent was still showing off and asked the assistant next to him, How do you say you want CO to do something? The assistant shrunk his neck. Just type. He only needed to type? The agent was so beautiful. Who would have thought that he would one day become the landlord? Just as he was about to put his hands on the keyboard, a sentence appeared in the game. Do you want to go offline now, or do you want me to call you and force you to go offline? Big manager Feng. Feng didn't expect his identity to be exposed as soon as he arrived, and his back suddenly trembled. Then he heard his CEO say, It seems that the company has given you too few tasks recently, and you even have time to play games? You'll work overtime for a week starting tomorrow. Feng, wait a minute. He spent 50,000 yuan to enslave CO. It wasn't so that the president could enslave him better in the future. What dungeon? This was a trap. He must have a hole in his brain to think of taking the opportunity to enslave CO. Didn't he say that he could play as long as he paid? Why? Feng was about to cry. 50,000 yuan, and all he got was the pleasure of being abused. Sure enough, he shouldn't have provoked CO. But that Spadesy's movements were so cool. One move to kill them all. And he still had time to type with CEO? Wait a minute. He could actually coordinate perfectly with CEO's movements? No one could keep up with CEO's gaming speed. This was definitely an expert among experts. Feng Yi's blood was boiling. He stood up from the sofa with a bang, grabbed his assistant, and pointed at the screen. This Spadesy, I don't care how you do it, find out everything about him, whether he's a man or a woman, if he has a boyfriend or girlfriend, how old he is, where he's from, and what's his occupation. I want to see his photo on my desk tomorrow. President Fu, why do you want his photo? The assistant was confused. Could it be that the vice president had become stupid after spending 50,000 yuan? Feng Yi's eyes sparkled. I want to nurture him into a professional almighty second only to the CEO. Of course, I have to see what he looks like first. Go get it. This was an unexpected harvest. His maneuvers were too beautiful. This kind of gameplay was most suitable for live streaming. The team had always needed such a person who could coordinate with the CEO. But even Coco and the others couldn't do it. Now that he could finally do a special topic, it was as if God was helping him. Wait a minute, I'll add her as a friend first. Feng Yi had thought that since his CEO had revealed his identity, he would be verified quickly. Unexpectedly rejected? Chapter 60. Feng didn't believe it, so he kept pressing the friend button. But as soon as the game was over and the loot was distributed, he was kicked out. Kicked out? Fu Jiu had a habit of never adding friends when she was playing games. Even the addition of Almighty Qin was a surprise. How could she add another person? Of course, she rejected him. Now all her attention was on the money she had earned. The number on her bank card skyrocketed, which made her feel indescribably happy. It was really different to fight a boss with a god. He was handsome, and his appearance fee was so high. Including the previous 2 games, she had earned 60,000 yuan, which was enough for her to buy computer parts. Even if she threw away the lobster money she owed today, she still had about 40,000 yuan. Fu Jiu bit her lollipop and sent Almighty Qin 4 words without hesitation: "Let's call it a day. Before we go to sleep, let's calculate." Qin Mo slowly typed on the keyboard. "The money you earned today." Fu Jiu paused. She dropped her lollipop. Why did the Almighty still want to calculate money with her? This wasn't like the rich guy who gave her 399,999 yuan as soon as she came online. I thought the Almighty would treat money like dirt. Fu Jiu flipped her silver hair. The money in her hands flew away, which was a terrible feeling. Qin Mo replied leisurely, "It seems like you have a fundamental misunderstanding of me. I'm a businessman who would do things that aren't profitable." Fu Jiu quickly defined him. She thought about how she still needed to bring the Almighty around in the future, so it would be good to establish a long-term partnership. She smiled devilishly. "I'll transfer half of it to your WeChat later." "Half?" Qin Mo smiled faintly. "Who said anything about half? I'll get 90% and you get 10%. Fu Jiu looked at the extremely lopsided dividend ratio and couldn't help but say, "Almighty, don't you think it's shameless to split the money like this?" Qin Mo's voice was indifferent, and he asked Fu Jiu 3 questions in a row. Whose name is the one who took the jobs? Who are the onlookers looking at? Who is the one who bid so high in the end? Fu Jiu, "It's all me." Qin Mo took a puff of his cigarette before typing another line of words. "So, it's only fair that you get 1 and I get 9. In the face of such a vengeful man, what else could Fu Jiu say? She opened WeChat and transferred a large amount of money to him with a condition: "Continue to work with me." When Fu Jiu transferred the money, she told herself that she was casting a long line to catch a big fish. The Almighty had already earned 60,000 per round. The next time they started advertising, they would definitely earn more. Treat it as an investment. But he still felt the pain. What was originally a net profit of 5 digits had shrunk to 4 digits in the time it took to say a single sentence. Fu Jiu bit her lollipop gloomily. Aside from being cute when she was flirting with him, this man wasn't easy to trick. Fu Jiu had just transferred the money when Qin Mo received a tearful call from his agent. "Xiao Qin, that Spade Z actually rejected me, he actually rejected me." After Qin Mo heard the general meaning of the message, his gaze deepened. He opened his phone and saw a WeChat transfer of more than 30,000 yuan. That guy must have been very reluctant when he transferred the money. Just like today when he had to pay the bill at the hotel. Chapter 61. Qin Mo turned off the computer and stood up, but he didn't go to sleep right away. His slender fingers moved slightly, and he sent a WeChat message to Fu Jiu. "Did you just reject a player's friend request?" Fu Jiu agreed and felt that she should flirt with him again before going to sleep. She opened the voice message and replied, "Except for the Almighty, I didn't add anyone else in the game. Are you touched? Do you want to marry me? If it's someone with a body like the Almighty's, I might consider sleeping with him." Qin Mo took the documents from Secretary Liang. He was still pressing his phone with one hand, and his lazy voice came into Secretary Liang's ears, with the clarity of a teenager. Secretary Liang couldn't hear the voice on the other side of the phone, but his CO suddenly stopped moving. He stood there without saying a word, and the expression on his face kept changing. His fair and slender fingers clutched the phone beside his ear, and his eyes were filled with uncontrollable coldness. It was as if he would crush the person on the other side of the phone to death if he said one more word. Secretary Liang didn't dare to watch anymore. He lowered his head and pretended to pack his bag. Finally, his SO took a deep breath, opened the WeChat message, and replied with a deep voice message, "If I hear the word sleep from your mouth again, you don't have to talk anymore." Sleep? Secretary Liang's eyes were burning. Qin Mo glanced at him and closed the door with an indifferent expression. Secretary Liang, "No, Xiu, where do you want me to go in the middle of the night? It's very cold outside the rooftop." After dealing with the eavesdropper, Qin Mo unbuttoned his shirt with one hand and sent a voice message with the other. "The player who added you is my agent." "I know." Fu Jiu twirled her silver hair with her fingers and put her legs on the computer table, looking indescribably handsome. "If I don't want to, I can use your back door. Why should I use someone else's?" Maybe it was because it was too late, but when the youngster's voice rang in her ears, it didn't sound so annoying anymore. Qin Mo pulled out a towel from the side. When he tilted his head, his white shirt was half open, revealing his beautiful abs and sexy mermaid lines. As he unbuttoned his pants, they moved up slightly. At that moment, Qin Mo seemed to have thought of something. He paused for a moment and quickly threw the trousers to the side. He pressed the phone screen and replied indifferently, "Tomorrow, the Qin group will sign the first batch of rookies. As a specially recruited member, you can come directly. What about the preliminaries in half a month? This is an internal move." Fu Jiu understood Almighty Qin's meaning with just these 3 words. She curled up the corner of her mouth and said, "I'll go after I buy the accessories tomorrow." This was Almighty Qin's reply. If he didn't say anything, it would always be a few words, incomparably cold. Fu Jiu didn't mind. She yawned and laid down on the bed casually. Her soft silver hair spread out, accentuating her white pointy chin. She replied in a daze, "Good night." In the foggy bathroom, Qin Mo listened to the sound coming from the phone. It was low and soft, not at all like the domineering and mischievous youngster that usually infuriated people. Subconsciously, his fingers slid across the screen and tapped on the short green voice message again. Separated by the fog, no one could see the expression on Qin Mo's elegant and handsome face. Chapter 62. After realizing what he had done, Almighty Qin's beautiful eyebrows furrowed. The black hair hanging in front of his forehead was still dripping water, and just like that, it hit the phone screen. Qin Mo took the towel and threw the phone away. He must have played too much games that his fingers were broken. Why did he think that guy's voice was nice? He obviously wanted someone to strangle him. Another night passed. Fu Jiu woke up the next day, but she wasn't in a hurry to go to school. It was Wednesday. Although school was important, buying spare parts and signing with the Qin group were obviously more important. Fu Jiu thought about it and decided to ask for a leave. When she made this request, Chen Xiaodong stood beside her and looked at her with an expression that said, "I knew young master wouldn't be obedient for a month. You're going to be a demon again." Fu Jiu curled her lips into a smile. She freed one hand, leaned over, and patted his cheek lightly. "I, your young master, have something to do. Go to class by yourself and help me ask for leave, sick leave. Don't always let the teacher think that I like to skip classes." Chen Xiaodong was stunned the first time he was patted. His young master was too handsome up close, so handsome that he couldn't react. Also, his young master winked at him. Chen Xiaodong took a deep breath. No, he had to stay away from his young master in the future. What if he was turned gay? He was going to get married and have kids in the future. According to the information provided by the Almighty, the internal recruitment for the Qin Group's team would officially start after 1. Fu Jiu had money on hand now. Even though it was only 4 digits, it wasn't a problem for her to buy a good computer. For example, graphics cards and RAM. She really didn't understand physics, so she didn't want to waste the teachers at school. Instead, she wanted to find a place to buy her equipment. Not only did she want to protect her family's company, but she also wanted to slap the faces of those ungrateful scumbags who left just like that. Fu Jiu's long and narrow eyes narrowed. She unwrapped a lollipop and put it in her mouth. She put her left hand in her pocket and looked up at the computer city in front of her. It was said that there were a lot of good stuff hidden here. Many professional players came here to buy spare parts. It was a useful place for this competition. Fujio pushed the door open and walked in. She followed the guide on the technology forum and found the store with the cool decorations. It was indeed different from the ordinary computer shops outside. The moment they entered, they felt as if they had entered an electronic world. There were 4 big screens in the shop, each of which was playing the game. This was Almighty Chin's in-game image. He lifted one hand, and black feathers filled the sky, forming a giant vortex. Each feather could kill the opponent. Fujio also thought that Almighty Chin's ultimate move was very cool. But her thin lips perked up. This seemed to be the scene of them playing the game together yesterday. After all, the person who cooperated with the Almighty to use this ultimate move was her. Fujio recognized her own character, Spade Z. It seemed like playing with the Almighty had a bigger impact than she had imagined. The book that they had seen last night had been used by the shop as a display. She wondered if the shop owner would give her a discount if she told them her identity. Chapter 63. Fujio knew that he wasn't referring to her just from the way he addressed her. After all, that old guy wanted the whole world to know that she, the prodigal, had nothing to do with him anymore. Since he wasn't referring to her, was he referring to another young master Fu? Fujio raised her eyebrows and looked to her side. A young man about the same age as her, dressed in a white suit. He was quite good-looking, but his head was like his mother's, so he wasn't very tall. He didn't seem to like talking much, but there was a hint of impatience in his eyes. He looked like a spoiled young master. This young master was none other than Fu Zhongyi's most precious illegitimate son, Fu Shiming. There were 2 people who came with him to buy accessories, and Fujio knew one of them. No, not really. To be exact, they had met face to face. Back then, she was still naive and dressed like a hooligan. When she quarreled with He Honghua, it was this guy who looked at her with a smile on his face. Fujio could still remember the way he looked at her, contemptuous and disdainful. It was probably because she kept seeing that gaze that she would quarrel with He Honghua over trivial matters. The manager of the company, Du Zhe. The scumbag who caused her mother to be at a loss. Fujio bit the lollipop with her white teeth, and the corner of her mouth slowly turned up into a smile. Was everyone here? She really had to remember these 2 faces, or else what would happen if she missed when she hit them? Du Zhe also saw the prodigal son that he despised the most. In the past, out of consideration for He Honghua, he still had to address him as young Master Fu whenever he saw him. In actual fact, he had long hated this mother and son pair. The older one was from the countryside and the younger one had no taste. Being around them would lower his status. Unlike the person he was following now, who was not only knowledgeable but also talented in games. They were both children of the Fu family, but this person's future was more than twice as bright as that prodigal son's. Young master. Du Zhe glanced at Fujio and turned back to Fu Shiming. Why don't we go over there and take a look? There are so many flies here, and it would be bad if they spoil your mood. Fu Shiming also recognized Fujio. But so what? He had never put his stupid brother in his eyes. When he was young, he was always called a bastard. He had to yield to Fujio in everything. Now he was right. Who is Fujio anyway? That kind of trash wasn't even worth a glance from him. Fu Shiming raised his chin, pulled up the zipper of his jacket, and said seriously, "He doesn't need to leave, so why should I? Keep picking. Didn't you just say that the things here are good? My keyboard needs a new one a long time ago. This one looks good. I'll buy it here." "All right." Du Zhe laughed. Young master is right. If he doesn't need to leave, then we don't need to leave either. The other person also laughed. Young Master Fu is indeed knowledgeable about computers. When we go to the Qin group later, I will be able to help young Master Fu. I still need Manager Li's help. Du Zhe continued. I heard that Manager Feng is very particular about first impressions. In addition to playing games well, he must also be good-looking. This Chapter 64. Fu Ximing was a calm kid. After hearing Manager Li's words, he didn't show too much excitement. It was good for a high school student to have this little bit of arrogance. Duze laughed. He wasn't proud, but he wanted that prodigal to hear the news. He wanted to see the difference between him and young Master Fu. It would be best if he got angry again and started a fight with them in the shop, then he would tell He Honghua about it. Then He Honghua's company wouldn't need any more trouble, and it would definitely collapse. Duze's plan was good, but he didn't expect that Fu Jio wouldn't be angry at all. Fu Jio was not angry at all after hearing their words. Instead, she picked up a mouse and asked the shop assistant, "How much is this model?" That careless look made it seem like she didn't care about them at all. Duze frowned, but he quickly relaxed. Nowadays, even people who don't know anything about computers come to this shop to mess around. In the future, this shop should have a VIP system or something to regulate who can enter and who can't. Manager Li knew a little about the Fu family's business, so he glanced at Fu Jio. "Manager Du, let's do our own thing. Don't care about these small fries. If they want to burn money, let them. This set of equipment isn't cheap." Duze thought about it and agreed. He Honghua's current wealth wasn't enough for this prodigal. Buy it, the more the better. But unexpectedly, Fu Ximing also took a fancy to the mouse in Fu Jio's hand. "I want that model too." Duze opened his mouth, but he didn't say anything. Fu Jio curled up the corner of her lips. She looked so mischievous that the shop assistant blushed. "I'm really sorry." The shop manager heard the sound and walked over. "This is the same model as the Almighty's. There's only one left in the shop." "Only one left? Then who should it belong to?" The shop assistant felt that it should belong to this silver-haired handsome young man. After all, he was holding it in his hand and had to pay for it. But Duze wanted to challenge the bottom line. Since it's good stuff, it should belong to whoever pays more. This. The shop manager looked a little embarrassed. To be honest, as a businessman, of course he wanted to make more money. But doing business like this was too unreasonable. In the future, no one would come to their shop to spend money. Just as he was about to say something, he saw a few people in combat uniforms walk in from outside the shop. One of them was about 1.8 meters tall and looked very attractive. It was obvious that he came from a good family. He put a hand on Fu Ximing's shoulder and asked in a low voice, "Ming, what are you doing?" "I'm buying a mouse, but someone doesn't want to give it to me," Fu Ximing said as he glanced at Fu Jio. "Don't you think it's interesting?" That person laughed, and there was more or less a bit of evil in his voice. "That stupid brother of yours, can he compete with you?" "Old Yuan, give me some rights. We are all gamers. It's not good to give such a good mouse to a layman." Old Yuan was the store manager. Now that he saw that even pro teams had come, he immediately said, "Then let's go to the highest bidder." This was too much of a bully. The pretty boy would definitely be angry. As the salesgirl thought about it, she looked at Fu Jio with a touch of worry in her eyes. Chapter 65. 10,000. 10,000 yuan to buy a mouse? Isn't it too expensive? The salesgirl's eyes widened. Moreover, this handsome young man had just asked her in a low voice if she had any preferential policies. How did he suddenly become such a nouveau riche? Duze was also stunned. He Honghua was begging everywhere for a loan. Could it be that there was still money left at home? Otherwise, why would this prodigal be so arrogant? Spending 10,000 to buy a mouse was indeed too expensive. Even a pampered young master like Fu Ximing felt the pinch. However, with so many friends watching and the manager of the Qin Group's club, he couldn't lose face. 11,000. Fu Ximing sneered and raised the price. Who didn't know that He Honghua had no money? "You're still pretending." He wanted to see how far this prodigal could go against him. 11,000? Fu Jio laughed and slowly put down the things in her hands. "Boss, you can sell this mouse to this idiot. Spending 10,000 yuan on a mouse, either he has money to burn or he's sick in the head." The store manager, Fu Jio, didn't care about other people's reactions. She sucked on another lollipop, smiled evilly, and took out the hard drive under the mouse. "Actually, I want this more." Give me 10 with the biggest memory. After all, he wasn't here to buy a mouse, but to buy a hard drive. Then why did he still bid? And he even shouted so high. Could it be? Fu Ziming's fingers tightened, and the words came out one after another. Fu. Are you kidding me? Yeah, I tricked you. Fu Jiu put her silver hair back and smiled fiercely. So what? You. Fu Ziming was so angry that his whole body was trembling. However, he was still rational. He was also thinking about his status at all times. He could not argue with a person who was completely unpresentable on so many occasions. That would only lower his image. Fu Ziming took a deep breath and laughed. It's just 10,000 yuan. I know you can't afford it now, but you're smart enough to think of a backup plan. When my dad and your mom get divorced, let's see how you can still be so arrogant. Facing such a person, Fu Jiu wasn't angry at all. Instead, she curled up her thin lips. Fu Ziming, if I were you, I wouldn't tell everyone that I'm an illegitimate child, or that my mother is a mistress, and that my first wife got divorced. It seems like you aren't ashamed of it but proud of it? As expected, not everyone in this world can be called human. Fu Ziming saw that more and more people were gathering around them. His face was livid as he said, "Just you wait." When the shop assistant heard this, she understood what was going on. It turned out that this young master was not only bullying people, but he was also occupying Nestle's nest. She hated this kind of person the most. As soon as she saw that Fu Ziming was about to leave, she immediately shouted, "Sir, please settle your bill before you leave. You've spent a total of 11,000 yuan. Are you paying by credit card or cash?" Fu Ziming took another deep breath and pointed at Du Zhe. "Get him to pay." Du Zhe did not expect such an outcome. Not only did he fail to bully that prodigal, he even wasted 111,000 yuan on a mouse that was only worth a few hundred yuan. Most importantly, he was the one who paid for it. What bad luck. What's wrong with this prodigal? Did he become smarter? No, that's impossible. Chapter 66. After getting rid of those annoying scumbags, Fu Jiu was in a better mood than when she first arrived. She curled up the corner of her mouth, lowered her head, and picked out some small parts. She handed them all to the salesgirl and smiled handsomely. "That's it. Check out, thank you." The salesgirl took it and gave a 10% discount without hesitation. Her face was still blushing. The beautiful young man's tone was so nice and gentle. She wouldn't get sick of a customer like him even if there were 100 of them. "You don't want a mouse?" This question wasn't asked by the salesgirl, but by the man who had just put his arm around Fu Ziming's shoulder. He was wearing a uniform, and the smile on his face wasn't friendly at all. Fu Jiu had one hand in her pocket, and she didn't even look at him. She paid the money, took her things, and left. She didn't expect that the man would actually curl his lips, and as he brushed past her, he lightly said, "Interesting." Interesting, wasn't it? Fu Ziming's stupid brother used to blush whenever he saw him. But now, it was like he didn't know him at all. The man narrowed his eyes and didn't take Fu Jiu seriously. After all, no matter how much he changed, he was still gay. He didn't want to provoke such a pervert. Once he got attached, he couldn't get rid of him. Even if he was good-looking, he was still disgusting. "Boss, come and see. The shop is broadcasting the video of Almighty Qin and that Spade Z playing games together yesterday. I really envy this guy. In normal competitions, only you can compete with Almighty Qin, but this guy can play games with Almighty Qin. He's so lucky." I asked, "And he's not from the Supreme Alliance. I don't know which team he's from. How come he's a newbie?" The man followed his teammate's finger and saw the screen full of silver light. He was shocked and couldn't help but spit out two words, "Beautiful." It was really beautiful. Even he couldn't reach that kind of hand speed. The Spades. Who the hell was he? 2 o'clock in the afternoon. A lot of people started to enter the Qin Group's club. Fu Jiu was among them. The person filling out the form asked, "Do you have a letter of introduction?" Fu Jiu shook her head. The man frowned and pointed to the queue next to him. "Then take your number and wait by the side. When it's your turn, someone will let you in. Fu Jio didn't say much. She took the number card according to the rules and sat there with her legs crossed. Since she had nothing to do, she began to study the hard drives she bought. She learned how to disassemble and install them, and what kind of casing was needed. It would be best if it was a smaller one so it would be more effective in disguise. You're also here to sign up for the internal signing? A bespectacled boy at the side seemed to have mustered up all his courage before he dared to talk to Fu Jio. Me. Apparently, the boy could not speak fluently. Fu Jio smiled, looked up, and nodded. The boy was stunned, thinking that this person was really handsome. You'll definitely pass the interview if you look like this. Listen, I heard them say that Manager Feng cares a lot about looks. You're also very handsome. After Fu Jio said that, she added with a smile, still very young. Just as the two of them were chatting, Fu Jio's WeChat rang. It was a message from the Almighty, 3 short words. Have you arrived yet? Not even a punctuation mark. Chapter 67. In the big office on the top floor of the Qin Group, Secretary Liang clearly saw his CEO's fingers suddenly pause while he was texting. That originally indifferent expression seemed to be starting to become not so good. What was going on? Secretary Liang subconsciously thought of online dating. Qin Mo was still looking at that WeChat message, and he raised his eyebrows. The Qin Group is not a place for you to flirt. He sent the message forcefully and his eyes were cold. Do you understand? Fu Jio looked at the reply and replied coolly with a lollipop in her mouth. Don't worry, Almighty. No one here is more handsome than you. If I really want to flirt, I will flirt with you. You are a big fish. Big fish? Who would like to be described like that? Did a biology teacher teach this guy Chinese? Qin Mo clenched his fingers, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Secretary Liang stood beside him, and he felt that his CO was looking at his phone as if he was looking at a dead thing that was about to die. As a bystander, he couldn't help but tremble from the bottom of his heart. What did those people on WeChat do to piss off the CO? The CO was in a good mood this morning, but why did he suddenly cool down? Qin Mo pushed open the door of the conference room with one hand and sent the last WeChat message on his phone screen. Then he raised his head and looked straight at Secretary Liang with a pair of deep, watery eyes. His voice was cold. Go and inform the team now. In the future, if anyone in the team flirts with someone in the company, I will cut off their salary. After Secretary Liang answered, he felt that the notice was a bit strange. Flirting? All the teams were practicing their skills in the game. In order to prepare for the upcoming city war, everyone had been in the company for a few days. Who would be in the mood to flirt? Besides, how could they flirt with a bunch of young men? Even if they wanted to flirt, they should at least pick a girl, right? At this moment, Fu Jio was still sitting on the cold bench. She looked at Almighty Qin's message and smiled. Her fingers moved quickly. You go ahead with the meeting. I'm fine on my side. I should be able to pass. She didn't want to bother the Almighty with trivial matters like the competition. She needed him to earn money, so she couldn't just take him out for a walk. Although the Almighty said that he would come to see her after the meeting. However, Fu Jio still felt that it was a small competition and she could win easily. Besides, hadn't that manager Feng always wanted to poach her? He couldn't let her down. Knowing that the other party didn't have time to reply to her WeChat, Fu Jio put her phone away and waited quietly for her number to be called. The boy's face turned red. I don't have eyebrows. I'm very, very ordinary. You'll look better after you take off your glasses. Fu Jio turned her face, her silver hair shining. Your foundation is there. The boy was a little shy. Thank you. You're welcome. Fu Jio put the parts into her bag. The boy asked again, You? Which district are you from? Hero? Zone C. With the lollipop in her mouth, Fu Jio leaned back casually. Even though she was in a corner, she seemed to be glowing. Area C? The boy suddenly widened his eyes and lowered his voice mysteriously. Then, do you know Spade Z from Zone C? Chapter 69. Fu Jiu wasn't annoyed by his words. She just said lightly, "Then what do you think we should do? I've already filled in my grades. Take your form back and redo it." Manager Lee didn't even look at him and just threw Fu Jiu's form at him casually. The boy who had just spoken to Fu Jiu looked at him worriedly. Fu Jiu smiled and bent down to pick up the form. Only then did the boy calm down. He wanted to quickly pull him over to do another test. But who would have thought that as soon as Fu Jiu straightened her body, she would raise her hand and use a little force, and the form paper would instantly split in half. At first, it was just the sound of typing on a keyboard. But now, under Fu Jiu's influence, everyone stopped what they were doing. The testing room was so quiet that only the sound of paper being torn could be heard. When Fu Jiu tore that form into pieces and put it in front of Manager Lee, she was surrounded by a flood of discussions. However, she acted as if she hadn't heard anything. She placed one hand on the table and lowered her voice. "If the Qin Club can hire a manager like you, then I'd rather not play games with this team." Suddenly, the testing room was in an uproar. No one dared to talk to the club manager like that. Did he really not want to be nominated? Manager Lee had never been provoked like this before. He was completely embarrassed. The anger on his face had already burned his eyes. "Very good. You have guts, right? Then take your things and scram." Fu Jiu sneered and didn't say anything else. She took her school bag, hung it on her shoulder, and walked straight out of the testing room. Her back view was unbelievably cool. The boy sat on his seat and looked at his hand speed. Then he looked at the screenshot of the computer beside him. Finally, he gritted his teeth and ran out with his bag. Wait. After Fu Jiu heard the sound behind her, she turned around and raised her eyebrows. "Why did you come out?" I saw you leave. I don't want to be there anymore." After the boy finished speaking, he broke into a big smile. Although I really want to enter the Qin Corporation, but for someone like me who can't even speak properly, I'm sure I won't get any training resources in the end. That manager looks very snobbish. I don't like this kind of environment. Playing games is supposed to be happy, right? Fu Jiu touched the bridge of her nose. She couldn't help but feel a little guilty after hearing those words. After all, her original intention in playing games was to make money, and now she was trying to take back He Honghua's company. Compared to this obedient child, her starting point seemed to be too utilitarian. Since we don't need to compete, let's go eat." The boy's face was flushed and he was very handsome. I know that there's a good hot pot restaurant here. So, I've always wanted to eat with the people in the game. I didn't expect that my wish would come true so soon. Fu Jiu, why did she always feel that this obedient baby was very similar to Almighty Qin in some aspects? Was it an illusion? Why were these gods so nice to the people in the game? "Let's eat, but I don't have money on me. You treat first and I'll treat you next time." As Fu Jiu spoke, she raised her hand and put it on the boy's shoulder. This time, the obedient baby's face turned even redder, but he was still very cute. He nodded heavily. "I'll treat. That hot pot restaurant is mine." Fu Jiu. Chapter 70. In the business conference room, the atmosphere was as low as ever. The people in the marketing department were still talking about this year's data in a trembling voice. They were afraid that if their CEO wasn't satisfied, he would look at them with his deep eyes. Fortunately, the CEO seemed to be absent-minded today, as if he had something else on his mind. He kept playing with a pure white phone in his hand. "CEO Qin, that's about it." The people in the marketing department subconsciously waited to be scolded after they finished talking. Unexpectedly, that's it? Everyone couldn't get used to it. Qin Imo didn't pay much attention to it. He just needed to adjust the data. He paid more attention to the time. At this time, that guy's test should be over. When he entered the team, he would keep him by his side so that he wouldn't flirt with others. Thinking of this, Qin Mo's mouth turned up slightly, revealing a faint smile. The senior executives in the meeting were stunned. They stared at the faint smile on their CEO's face, wondering what day it was. The CEO seemed to be in a good mood. After another 10 minutes, Chin Mo raised his hand and said calmly, "That's all for today. We'll continue tomorrow." The senior manager of the planning department hadn't submitted the plan yet, but he was still very happy that the CEO made this decision at the last minute. He immediately said happily, "Yes, yes." Chin Mo was the first to stand up. His legs were perfectly straight in the tailor-made trousers. Coupled with his demonic aura, as soon as he walked out of the conference room, everyone felt the pressure on their heads disappear. They couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief and collapse into their chairs. But where was the CEO going at this time? Secretary Liang was by Chin Mo's side, holding today's meeting minutes in his hands. "So Chin, your dinner starts at 7, isn't it too early for us to go out now? Do you want to take a break first?" "No, let's go to the club." Chin Mo gave the order as soon as he got in the elevator. Their club was right next to the Chin Group building, and it wasn't far. Chin Mo didn't tell Fujio that the meeting was over. He wanted to go over. Sometimes it was good to surprise that guy. Secretary Liang was a bit surprised. "Go to the club? It seems that there is an internal signing today. So Chin wants to go over and have a look?" Chin Mo didn't explain further and just nodded lightly. Secretary Liang paused. "Then please wait a moment. The people over there don't know that the president is going. I have to make a call. The contestants who participated in the internal signing this time are all fans of the president. If you go like this, it will cause a sensation. What can a few dozen people do?" Chin Mo raised his hand. There was a pure black diamond button on his cuff. Along with his movements, a luxurious light seeped out. His fingertip pressed the elevator button. Secretary Liang had no choice but to put his phone back. It seemed that the CEO had already made up his mind to go there today. Vice Liang was surprised. Among the internal signing participants, the CEO was Chin Mo. So suddenly, Secretary Liang's eyes lit up. The little vixen that the CEO met online was one of the internal sign contestants? That was right. Chapter 71. As soon as Chin Mo entered the club, he saw his silly agent standing on his tiptoes, waiting for someone. Feng Yi was indeed waiting for someone, but the person he was waiting for never showed up. After seeing his almighty, his eyes lit up. "Siu, didn't you say that Spade Z would come? Where is he? I've been waiting for him here for a long time. And I had to disguise myself. If the reporters recognized me, they would definitely catch me for an interview. I'm actually very popular." Chin Mo glanced at his head with a hat on, and his voice was indifferent. "Is this the result of your disguise? You're just a stupid fisherman?" Feng Yi decisively turned his head to ask Secretary Liang, "Don't I look good?" Secretary Liang blinked. Feng Yi felt that he had enough of his almighty's poisonous tongue. He took off his hat. "Even if I don't look good, where's Spadesy? He's doing a test inside." Chin Mo threw down this sentence and walked to the test room. When the people in the club saw his handsome face, they all took a step back and couldn't help but cover their mouths. Almighty Chin actually came. The outside of the club was in an uproar. It was the third round of the test in the test room. This time, they were logged into Hero to test their ability to clear dungeons. They were all using their own accounts. Manager Lee was still angry about Fujio's behavior just now. He walked in circles and said coldly, "Let me tell you, if you're playing a game, you should have the attitude of playing a game. Don't be like that wastrel who just left. Does he think that the Chin Corporation is a place that anyone can enter? Then you just..." Before he could finish his words, he was shocked by the person standing at the door. "See, President. Why is he here?" Manager Lee looked at that tall and noble figure and immediately walked up to him. "So Chin Mo didn't even look at him. He walked in with an indifferent face. He was dressed in a well-ironed suit, looking extremely noble. All the players stopped what they were doing and looked up at him. They couldn't hide their excitement. Almighty Chin. They saw the real Almighty Chin. Chin Mo's fame wasn't just because of his face, but also because of his outstanding maneuvering skills. Needless to say, he wasn't just the Prince Charming in the hearts of women. He was also the hero that many players wanted to follow. Now that he had appeared here, it naturally caused a frenzied reaction. Qin Emo stood there as though there was no one around. His eyes scanned the players inch by inch, and in the end, he frowned. Why wasn't he here? Qin Emo lowered his head and glanced at the WeChat message. His number was on it. Number 19? Qin Emo followed the number and saw that the seat in front of the computer was empty. Secretary Liang had been with his young master for a long time, so he quickly understood the meaning of his CEO's gaze. He turned his head and asked, "Where's the contestant sitting at machine number 19? As soon as this question came out, the testing room was silent for half a minute. The players looked at each other with an indescribably subtle expression. No one dared to speak. Instead, they secretly glanced in the direction of Manager Li. Manager Li himself was also stunned. After all, he never thought that Secretary Liang would ask about this kind of thing. He was still thinking of an excuse. Qin Emo stood there, his eyes narrowing dangerously. Chapter 72. Manager Li was still pretending. He let out a long sigh and said, "What else could it be? Secretary Liang, you don't know. I don't know who recommended this contestant 19 for the in-house signing. He is so unethical and doesn't follow the test rules. I asked him to leave." Suddenly, no one knew why, but the air in the testing room seemed to have frozen because of someone. Secretary Liang raised his head and looked at his CEO. That extraordinarily handsome face was covered with an unprecedented coldness. His voice was also terrifyingly deep, and every word he uttered made people tremble from the bottom of their hearts. "You said you let him go?" "Yes, CEO Qin." Manager Li laughed along. "That kind of prodigal is really nothing much. Luckily, you didn't meet him." Qin Emo suddenly laughed and walked towards him. He reached out and grabbed Manager Li's collar. His eyes were so cold that they could freeze a person to death. "Who do you think you are? How dare you let the contestant go? Be President Qin I?" Manager Li still wanted to explain. Feng Yi was even crazier than him. As soon as he heard his almighty's words, the one who left was definitely Spade Z. Spade Z, whom he had tried so hard to poach, had been driven away by this Old Li. He couldn't believe his ears. "Old Li, why are you doing this?" Manager Li knew that he could only pin his hopes on Vice President Feng. He hurriedly said, "I asked him to retest his hand speed, but he was unwilling. It was that prodigal who tore up the results sheet. He didn't want to come to our club." Qin Emo didn't believe him at all. He raised his hand and pointed, calling a contestant. "Tell me what exactly happened." The contestant didn't expect that his idol would call him. He immediately stood up and said excitedly, "Contestant 19 was the first to finish the hand speed test and fill out the form." Manager Li humiliated him and said that he only knew how to show off. He told him not to be so full of himself and to take the test again. When number 19 heard this, he tore the form on the spot. He even said that as long as the club has someone like Manager Li, he won't join Supreme Alliance. The contestant forced himself to finish his sentence because he realized that with every word he said, Almighty Qin's deep eyes would become colder. In the end, it was like a frozen pond. He looked as if he was going to kill someone. Feng Yi was listening from the side. He hadn't expected things to turn out this way. He looked up at Manager Li, his hand trembling. I asked you to watch the test. Did I ask you to cause trouble for me?" Qin Emo didn't waste time with anyone. Instead, he grabbed Manager Li's collar and pressed him in front of the computer. He was born in the third generation of the military and had never been gentle. At this moment, he displayed his ruthlessness to the extreme. Take a look at his hand speed. People like him have the right to be arrogant. That kind of Qin Emo was simply too terrifying. It lacked the nobility and indifference of the business world. His eyes were bloodthirsty and cold. Manager Li's whole body was trembling. "Boss Qin, I didn't do it on purpose. I really didn't do it on purpose." Chapter 73. It's me. Chin Mo threw him to the ground after he finished speaking. Manager Lee was completely stunned by the two cold words. His eyes shook violently, his face pressed against the computer screen, and just like that, he slumped into his seat. Even after Chin Mo left, he didn't come back to his senses. His face was frighteningly pale, because he knew that his future was over. He would be fired immediately without the CEO's order, and he wouldn't even be able to survive in Jiang City. But why was that wastrel introduced by CEO Chin? At the same time, Fu Jiao's hand speed was also displayed on the computers of all the contestants. Looking at that result, everyone who knew about games was stunned, and then there was an unbelievable uproar. More than 90%. At this moment, everyone was silent. Shock, and astonishment swept through the entire testing room. That kind of hand speed was something they couldn't achieve even if they practiced for a lifetime. Who on earth was this contestant 19? Everyone was asking and everyone was curious. But his information had already been torn up and thrown into the dustbin. What a slap to the face. Chin Mo strode forward. That extremely cold back made Secretary Liang and Feng Yi pale with fear. Especially Feng Yi. He was in charge of this internal drawing. Who knew that his people would directly reject Spade Z, who was poached by the CEO. Not only would the CEO be angry, but he also wanted to kill that bastard Old Li right now. Secretary Liang didn't dare to remind their CEO about the afternoon dinner, so he shrunk his neck and pretended to be invisible. Suddenly, Chin Mo stopped, took out his phone, and pressed the screen with his fingertips. He tilted his handsome face slightly. Where are you? 3 simple words. Did it look like a WeChat message? Secretary Liang and Feng Yi looked at each other. The person who could make the CEO send a WeChat message at this time? That little devil, Spade Z. At this moment, Fu Jiao was still looking at the hot pot restaurant that the boy mentioned. She raised her eyebrows. Is this the ordinary hot pot restaurant you mentioned? It was the only Michelin-starred restaurant in the 3 northeastern provinces. Apart from being rich, one had to be powerful to eat there. Ordinary hot pot restaurant? There were less than 10 of them in the whole world. The boy laughed and scratched his head. What do you want to eat? I'll ask them to get it for you. Meat, I'm a pure meat eater. Fu Jiao didn't even look at the menu. She just sat there devilishly and smiled charmingly. I didn't expect to pick up a rich second generation in a competition. The boy began to stutter again. No, I don't have any money. However, I can only treat you to hot pot. In the future, when I earn money, I'll treat you to something else. So cute? Fu Jiao winked and smiled, exuding a seductive aura. Boom. The boy blushed again. Do you always talk like this? What? Fu Jiao lowered her eyes and started to mix the sauce when she saw the soup being served. The boy pushed up his glasses. Yes, it's been discharging electricity. That's how handsome you are. Fu Jiao rested one hand on the back of the chair. Her silver hair and black eyes made her look devilish. The boy was stunned for a moment before he smiled. That's right. Wait, is your phone ringing? Phone? Fu Jiao turned sideways and took out her phone from her pocket with one hand. Seeing that it was a WeChat message from Almighty Chin, she held a chopstick in her mouth and replied. Chapter 74. At the Chin Group Club. That slender figure that could gather all the dazzling lights had already walked in. Other than the contestants who wanted to see their Almighty Chin, even the media set up their cameras. All of this was proof of Chin Mo's popularity. He wasn't in the entertainment circle, but he was more famous than a superstar. Other than Chin Mo, no one else could achieve this effect. It was as if it was that kind of natural arrogance that made him so popular that when he appeared, people would cover their mouths and scream. However, Feng Yi and Secretary Liang, however, knew that their CEO was almost frozen to death. Especially when he looked at his phone screen. He didn't know what the other party had sent to Zhou Qin, but his eyes turned completely cold. Fu Jiao didn't think there was anything wrong with her WeChat message. She sent a few more words over. Are you hungry? If you are, come over together. The hot pot restaurant is not bad, and the little handsome guy is cute. This guy really needed to be taught a lesson. Chin Mo stood there with his fingers paused. He wanted to take a deep breath, but there were so many people here that he couldn't even take a deep breath. He said stiffly, "Address." Fujio blinked. Why did Almighty Chin's tone sound a bit cold? Was he angry again? She didn't flirt with him, so why was he angry again? Fujio sat at the dining table with her left hand supporting her chin. She was casually typing the address with the other hand. After Chin Mo saw it, he frowned and ordered Secretary Liang to get the car ready. Secretary Liang listened to the address. Wasn't this the place where CEO Chin had his business meeting tonight? CEO Chin, should we go there now? Was it too early? It wasn't even time for dinner yet. Chin Mo didn't say anything. He took the car keys from his hand and sat in the driver's seat. He didn't want to bring anyone along. Before Secretary Liang could ask anything else, he saw their CEO's slender fingers grip the steering wheel. His dark hair fell down and covered his deep eyes. With a beautiful drift, the limited edition sports car with smooth lines drove into the North Road with a whistling sound. The president didn't look like he was going to a restaurant. Instead, he looked like he was going to seek revenge. At this moment, Fujio was still drinking her tea lazily. Her long and narrow eyes seemed to be shining as she looked at the boy very beautifully. "A friend is coming over to eat with us later. He's also someone I know from the game. You don't mind, do you?" "No, I don't mind." The boy's stuttering problem was still there. I'll ask them to add another set of cutlery. We've chatted for so long, but I still don't know your name." Hearing that, Fujio raised her hand and smiled. "Fujio. Good name." The boy probably thought about it for a long time before he could think of such a compliment. With a red face, he said, My real name is Feng Shang." In the game, it's called awarding you a slap of pleasure. Pooh! Even someone as cool as Fujio couldn't help but spit at the name of the game. It wasn't only because the name of the player was funny, but also because the player's in-game name was indeed a famous person in Hero. His maneuvers were awesome, and he had a lot of money. The only thing was that this guy was a chatterbox. Whenever he met a girl, he would say, "Girl, want to play with Uncle? Uncle will play games with you and fly with you." Chapter 75. Feng Shang knew why Fujio reacted this way. He scratched his cheeks in embarrassment, and even his ears were red. You probably think I'm different from how I am in the game. So you'll get used to it. My brother gave me a lot of money to play, but he didn't give me any cash. So I can only eat hot pot in my own restaurant. You're the first person who won't laugh at me for stuttering. So I really want to teach you, my friend. Fujio raised her eyebrows and her eyes flashed. Your brother? Your brother is Feng Yi? After all, the surname Feng was rare in Jiang City. The well-behaved boy nodded and asked, What's your name in the game? So we can play together in the game. So you can take me to dungeons and fly me? Fujio teased him with a smile. This was his famous saying. Hearing that, Feng Shang's face turned completely red. Fujio didn't want to tease him too much. After all, he wasn't Almighty Chin, who could be cold in the face of everything. She thought for a moment, put down her chopsticks, and looked at Feng Shang. I didn't have time to tell you at the club, but I'm actually Spade Z. Feng Shang froze. Then he pointed at her with his left hand and stuttered, You? How can you be Spade Z? My code name is Z. Fujio said something that was unclear. Feng Shang didn't understand, but Spade Z. He said he was Spade Z. The idol he wanted to see the most, Spade Z. Feng Shang didn't know what to say, so he looked up and said, Idol, let me calm down first. Fujio laughed. You're not stuttering anymore? Feng Shang also realized that he spoke very fluently just now, but he was still shocked. He seemed to think of something and said, That snobbish manager must be regretting it now. I saw you and young Master Chin playing together, and he dared to treat you like that. Young Master Chin will definitely make him pay. Don't talk about me. What about you? Why didn't you tell that manager that you are Manager Feng's younger brother? Fu Jiu curled up her lips slightly. That way, he wouldn't need to take the test to sign the contract. Feng Shang froze for a moment, then lowered his voice. I'm not suited to be a pro player. I stutter. No, I don't want to rely on my brother's connections to get in. I want to see my own true strength. If that's the case, are you interested in forming a team with me? Fu Jiu supported her chin with her fingers, looked up at Feng Shang and said evilly, "Let those people have an eye-opener?" Feng Shang was startled. Looking at the handsome face in front of him that could mesmerize countless girls, his eyes lit up. How can I widen their horizons? In 10 days, it'll be the official esports preliminaries. The Qin Corporation will also sign their official members here. When the time comes, we'll team up and kill them. What do you think? Fu Jiu put her hand on Feng Shang's shoulder in a very beautiful posture. Her fair skin was glowing, and the corner of her mouth had a unique ruthlessness. A strand of silver hair fell down and blocked her eyes, making it difficult to see her face. But even so, that kind of posture was enough to make people's blood boil. Okay. The well-behaved child held Fu Jiu's hand, looking like a hero who was about to make a pledge of blood. This was the scene Qin Mo saw when he walked in. Chapter 76. Co Qin. The waiter looked at the man's face carefully, and his voice was so low that it was almost inaudible. Qin Mo looked at the two people in front of him. Their straight backs were like the pine trees in the mountains, making people feel cold. His eyes were narrowed dangerously, and they were as cold as an ancient deep pool. The waiter wanted to say something, but he saw that the noble man in front of him had already walked to the window and grabbed the silver-haired youngster's collar. Bang! Fu Jiu was caught off guard. She turned around, and her face was almost buried in Qin Mo's chest. The cool peppermint scent spread into her nose through the hardness of his suit. She didn't need to guess to know that almighty Qin was here. Only this man liked to grab her collar. Fu Jiu looked up and saw him looking down at her. His eyes were like a deep well, indifferent and noble beyond belief. Those claws of yours are for dungeons, not for flirting with men. Qin Mo pinched Fu Jiu's back, and his voice was sexy and bewitching. If I see you flirting with anyone again, I'll break your hands. That would save me some trouble. Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows. I'm not flirting. We are in the alliance. And almighty Qin, you care about me so much. Is it because... She smiled slowly as she said this. She leaned over and whispered in his ear slowly, "Are you jealous?" Every man's ear was untouchable. Even if Qin Mo was abstinent, he was still a normal man. What he couldn't tolerate was being blown on like this. Looking at that face that made one's teeth itch, the youngster's smooth and tender face with the scent of youth candy, it was a very likable face, but he wanted to pinch it to death every time. Fu Jiu smiled and moved closer. Did I guess it right? When she moved away from him, her face brushed past his, and her pale lips were about to touch his ear. Fu Jiu. Qin Mo pulled forcefully and threw her back onto the seat. His cold, thin lips were pressed into a straight line, and his fists were clenched tightly. His voice was icy cold. Stay away from me when you speak, I'm not gay. I won't be jealous of you. Sit down and enjoy your hot pot. Qin Mo was speechless when he heard Qin Mo's words. You'd better stay away from me. Fu Jiu touched the bridge of her nose. Are you really angry? Did he go to find me after the meeting, only to find that I wasn't there, so he got angry? You can't blame me. That manager of yours is really too troublesome. With my bad temper, do you think I can tolerate it? The only reason I didn't beat him up was because he was on your turf. Does that mean I have to thank you? Qin Mo's voice turned colder. Feng Shang was dumbfounded. After all, he had seen young Master Qin a few times, but he had never seen him treat anyone like this. He didn't look like he really wanted to deal with his idol, but his eyes showed that he really wanted to break his idol's neck. But what did his idol just do? He almost kissed young Master Qin's ear? Was he looking for death? As his idol's new comrade, he had to say something for his idol, or else young Master Qin would really ban his idol. Young Master Qin, this really isn't Jiujiu's fault. That manager Li obviously didn't like him, so he told Jiujiu to get lost. Chapter 77. It was a nice word, but when Almighty Qin said it, it brought a chill that made people shiver from the bottom of their hearts. The air around them seemed to be frozen, and all the waiters didn't dare to look at him. Young Master Qin, who had power over 3 provinces, was really not someone to be messed with. They also hoped that second young master would shut up and stop talking, or even young Master Qin wouldn't be able to save second young master. Feng Shang did shut up, and his head was about to drop to the ground. Wasn't Jiujiu a good name? Why did young Master Qin's eyes look colder than before? Fu Jiu knew where the problem was. After all, if it were him, he would be in a bad mood when he found out that his friend was gone. In fact, Almighty Qin thought highly of her, or he wouldn't have gone to the club to find her right after the meeting. Almighty Qin could have sent his secretary, and he didn't have to go himself. Thinking of this, Fu Jiu put down her chopsticks, looked up at Qin Emo, and sighed. You didn't give me a letter of introduction, and that manager's words were too harsh, so I had to leave. Hearing the youngster's low voice, the coldness in Qin Mo's eyes gradually disappeared. He did forget to give this guy a letter of introduction, and he thought that nothing would go wrong with Feng Yi around. Thinking of this, Qin Emo took another look at the youngster with his head down and chopsticks in his hands. He frowned, and an inexplicable sense of guilt rose in his heart. So let's not talk about the past. Sit down and eat hot pot. Fu Jiu reached out and grabbed Qin Mo's arm. With the Almighty here, the food would definitely be able to keep up, and they could order a few more plates of meat. Qin Emo didn't expect the youngster to suddenly do this, and before he could react, he was dragged to a chair by the youngster. Their shoulders were still touching, and the distance between them was so close that he could clearly see the fine hair on the youngster's white cheeks if he tilted his head. This kind of closeness made him a little uncomfortable. He frowned, sat up straight, and said in a low voice, "That manager, I've taken care of it for you. Come back to the Qin group with me after dinner." Almighty, we are brothers. Fu Jiu scooped up the tender beef without looking up. She had an evil smile on her face. I'm someone who cares about my reputation. Think about it, if you were humiliated like that, would you go back just like that? When Qin Emo heard the word, humiliate, his fingers paused. He hadn't considered this point. When he saw the youngster pick up a piece of beef for him with his chopsticks, Qin Mo's beautiful brows furrowed even tighter. Since when did he become considerate of others? Was it because the youngster's expression was pleasing to the eye? Or was it because of the word, friend? He didn't forget that he wanted to crush this guy to death just now. It also saved him the trouble of always doing things that challenged his patience. However, in the end, this matter was indeed a problem on his side. Feng Shang, who was on the side, was very restless. His eyes were only focused on young Master Qin's expression. He saw that young Master Qin was staring at Fu Jiu coldly, and his eyes even darkened. Could it be that he hated his idol so much that he was trying to blacklist him? No, he had to save his idol. The obedient Feng Shang took a deep breath and braced himself to speak again. Chapter 78. Hearing that, Feng Shang's back stiffened, and his stuttering voice became more anxious. Young Master Qin, don't tell my brother about this. He will use his connections for me if he knows. Seems like he doesn't know. Qin Emo wiped the corner of his mouth slowly. The smile on the corner of his mouth was like a knife being sliced into pieces. Feng Shang always blushed, and now he was so anxious that he wanted to explain clearly. Fu Jiu swallowed the beef and said, Almighty, don't bully him. He's my teammate now. I'm not the only teammate you have. Qin Emo lifted the corner of his eyes and leaned back. He threw the car keys in his hand onto the table, which made a loud crackling sound. Fujio paused, then suddenly laughed. She raised her left hand and put it on Qin Mo's shoulder, looking like a playboy. Are you jealous? Don't worry, Almighty. There are only 2 of us in the game, and we are strong partners. Qin Mo curled up the corner of his mouth, twisted his hand away, and said coldly, if you can't change your bad habit of hitting others, I will eat 20 plates of beef today. Eat again? She took a whole day to digest the 20 lobsters last time. Eating was a small matter, but the main thing was to pay the bill. Fujio smiled and let go of his hand. That's because we have a good relationship. Really, don't bully Feng Shang. Why are you so protective of him? Qin Mo's eyes were a little low. Fujio said frankly, I want to take him to the esports competition next month. It's the only way to enter the team. I can take you there, but you don't want to go. You want to participate in the competition. Qin Mo looked up at the young man, reached out his finger, and flicked the tip of his nose. He smiled coldly. Stay away from me, don't talk about the only way, and don't flirt with me all the time. Tell the truth, it's good for you. Fujio laughed. To be honest, after today's humiliation, I don't think it's my style to quietly enter the Qin group. If I don't do something big, I will lose face. Lose face? I think you want to slap someone's face. Qin Mo lifted his lids and took out a cigarette. He held it between his lips and said faintly, Did San make you angry again? Fujio narrowed her beautiful eyes. I didn't expect the Almighty to use the adjective 3. However, I haven't seen San recently, but I bumped into San's son. Didn't I go to the computer city to buy equipment today? I saw a mouse model that you used before. He bullied me because I was poor and didn't have money, so he snatched my mouse. At that time, the manager of your club was also there. I think he didn't like me at that time, so he made things difficult for me during the test. It was clearly Lord Jiu who had tricked Fu Ziming, but in her mouth, it was Fu Ziming who had stolen her mouse. I have to say, when it comes to enemies, our Lord Jiu is so capricious and unprincipled. When Feng Shang heard this, he finally interrupted, I don't have money either. I can understand the feeling of being bullied. Fujio high-fived him. The 2 of them were like brothers in hardship. Feng Shang comforted her, Idol, I can give you my mouse. There's no need. Tonight, I'll clear a dungeon with the Almighty and earn some money. Fujio said as she stuffed a mouthful of beef into her mouth. She was eating spicy pot, and her lips turned brighter. Chapter 79. After finishing the delicious hot pot, Fujio wanted to say goodbye to Almighty Qin and go home to install her minigame. Although she didn't have all the parts she bought, she could still assemble the interior. She didn't expect that Almighty Qin would ask her to stay. I have a dinner here later. Come with me, and I'll send you home after eating. Fujio was about to refuse. Almighty Qin said calmly, I'll play the game with you after eating. Did he mean that if she didn't eat, she wouldn't play the game with him? But she had just finished the hot pot, and now, as if reading her mind, Qin Mo flicked the cigarette butt on his finger and continued, I'll leave after a few sips of wine. You don't have to force it on me. Actually, I can still eat another plate of beef. Fujio held her chin and smiled. I'll keep you company. Qin Mo didn't say anything else, but Feng Shang was watching from the side. He felt that young Master Qin's face had finally eased up since he came in. It wasn't good for Feng Shang to stay here because he was worried that his brother would come and find out that he had secretly participated in the competition. Speaking of the competition, Feng Shang still had a few questions to ask Fujio. Idol, who are the other 3 members of our team? Can you tell me their in-game names? I'll give them gold coins. Fujio was very satisfied that she had hooked up with such a good teammate. But the current members of the team. Fujio paused. Feng Shang sat up straight and waited for Fujio's next words with bright eyes. Only you and me. Fujio's hammer fell, and she was still as evil as before. Are you proud to be a veteran member? Even the well-behaved Feng Shang couldn't help but twitch his mouth when he heard this. So they didn't even have a team. Why did he feel like he was cheated by his idol? I'm here, aren't I? Fujio was about to pat Feng Shang's shoulder. Suddenly, Almighty Qin raised his hand and blocked the guy's movement. His gaze deepened as he tapped the lighter on his fair wrist. Your claws. Was he really going to take care of her? Fujio pouted her pretty thin lips and retracted her hand disinterestedly. Anyway, baby Shang, don't worry. We won't have to worry about not having anyone to fight with. Feng Shang thought about his idol's abilities in the game and relaxed a little. But who the hell was baby Shang? Baby Shang felt bitter in his heart, but he didn't say it out loud. Moreover, being recruited by his idol was indeed a blessing. Even if it wasn't on a large scale now, he believed that they would definitely become popular in the future. Furthermore, his idol had said that he would bring him along to fight for first place. If he really didn't have any teammates, he would use the game's gold coins to buy 3 to join the party. He had plenty of money in the game anyway. Thinking of this, Feng Shang stood up reluctantly. Then I'll leave first, idol. I'll go home and change my equipment. After all, I have to follow my idol and conquer the world. You and young Master Qin, socialize first. All right. Fujio lifted her lips, and her eyes reflected the light. It was very beautiful. Looking at his idol, Feng Shang's handsome face started to turn red again. He thought about it and decided to give his idol some advice, so he secretly tugged at the corner of Fujio's shirt. He didn't expect that his action would make that young Master Qin look at him. He just looked at him. His handsome godlike face was slightly tilted, and his phoenix eyes were half raised. His eyes were clearly curved into a faint smile, but they were cold and sinister. Chapter 80. Feng Shang finally understood why his elder brother, a smart and capable person, was so timid in front of young Master Qin. He was clearly a manager, but he couldn't even control the Almighty under him. So, apart from the fact that young Master Qin was the CEO of the corporation, his gaze could really kill people. The obedient Feng Shang shrunk his neck and swallowed back the warning he wanted to give his idol. Fujio noticed that she was still tugging at her, so she turned around and looked at her. What's wrong? No, nothing. Feng Shang's stuttering couldn't be changed. Jio, I'll be leaving first. Why, if you don't have anything else to do, you should go home early and log in. Don't provoke young Master Qin. It was a tiger. His idol was so smart he should know this too, right? But the main thing was, judging from his idol's reaction just now, it didn't seem like he knew about this. Fujio, on the other hand, was full. She looked a little like a careless cat. She waved her hand, looking as handsome as ever. You go first. I'll carry you in the game after I finish eating here. Okay. Feng Shang blushed again. He really thought that his idol was good-looking. He didn't want to leave, but he couldn't resist the coldness emanating from Almighty Qin. After thinking for a while, he left the hot pot restaurant while looking back repeatedly. He was the one who asked out with his idol, but in the end, he was the one who had to leave. He wanted to go home with his idol and let his idol see the equipment he had bought in-game. Almighty Qin was robbing her of her love. Thinking of this, baby Shang felt a little emotional, but he did not dare to say it. He secretly decided to hook up with more girls in the game today. After Feng Shang left, Qin Mo retracted his gaze. His voice was still calm. If you don't want Feng Yi to know that his brother is participating in the esports competition, stay away from him. It's the same in the game. Got it? Fujio stretched her back and agreed, but she might not actually do it. The two of them sat on one side. Sunlight shone in from the outside and shone on the young man's clean and delicate side profile through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Qin Mo stood up with the car key in his hand and raised his eyebrows at Fujio. Get up. Where are you going? Fujio was confused. Didn't they say that there would be a dinner party later? Almighty Qin was still cold and aloof. No emotions could be seen on his face. There's still some time before the meal starts. Go and digest the food first. Is racing to aid digestion? Fujio followed Almighty Qin down, and the first thing she saw was that top-end limited edition sports car with charming lines. It was painted in pure black, but the tires had a hint of red. This kind of car had great performance, and the starting price was estimated to be over 80. Chin Mo watched as the youngster's eyes lit up. He pressed the unlock button. The receptionist immediately stepped forward and opened the door for him. Fu Jiu thought about it. Generally speaking, at this point in the novel, if she said that she liked it, the Almighty would definitely say that he would give it to her immediately. After all, those gold coins and diamonds from before, right? 999999. Almighty Chin gave it away with a wave of his hand. Therefore, Fu Jiu said seriously, I like it very much. Just like the lobsters, give me 20 of them, I won't complain. Chapter 81. Fu Jiu. Almighty, you don't follow the plot of a novel. It's hard, you know. Chin Mo looked at the young man's slightly depressed expression, and his thin lips curled up into a faint smile. He grabbed Fu Jiu by the back of her collar and shoved her into the passenger seat. When the car started to move, it was even cooler than it looked, especially when there were two equally outstanding people sitting inside. Fu Jiu's silver hair was blown into a mess by the wind coming in from the car window, and she looked indescribably cool. Such a handsome face and luxurious style. When the beautiful car glided through the city center, people thought it was two superstars shooting a movie. That scene attracted many people to stop and take pictures while the sports car was waiting for the traffic light. However, Chin Mo's right hand was holding the steering wheel, and his noble and indifferent side profile was almost as fast as the car flashed by, stopping at the entrance of Computer City. Fu Jiu looked at that place and couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. Chin Mo stood there, tall and handsome. There weren't many people in the store, but everyone who entered the store was looking in Fu Jiu's direction. To be precise, they were all looking at Almighty Chin. After all, this wasn't the outside world, but a place frequented by people who liked to play games. Chin Mo was recognized by his potential fans as soon as he entered the store. It's Almighty Chin. Is he here to buy accessories too? I didn't expect to see Almighty Chin here. Most of the people who came to buy equipment were boys, and they weren't as crazy as girls. But because of Chin Mo's popularity, it still caused quite a stir. When the store manager heard that Almighty Chin was here, he immediately strode over, not daring to be negligent. After all, for businessmen like them, Chin Mo was not only an esports almighty, but also a young Master Chin who could shake the entire Jiang city with a stomp of his feet. The store manager's face was full of smiles. Just as he was about to speak, he saw Fu Jiu standing beside Chin Mo. The mouse-snatching incident happened not long ago. The store manager naturally had an impression of it, especially Fu Jiu's cool silver hair and handsome face. It was hard to forget. But he never expected that. This young man would appear with Almighty Chin. The store manager's heart skipped a beat, and his voice shrank a little. Young Master Chin, Chin Mo glanced at the store manager, his tone cold and concise. Which mouse did he see in the afternoon? Take it out. There weren't many words, but the store manager cleared his throat with difficulty. Young Master Chin, we only have one mouse in the store. After it was taken away at noon, we're out of stock. I'll arrange for someone to get the goods, but I'll have to trouble young Master Chin to wait for a while. By the time the manager reached the end of his sentence, he didn't dare to look at Chin Mo's face anymore. Chin Mo's strong aura made him almost unable to lift his head. Chin Mo's voice was still calm. He pointed at Fu Jiu and said to the store manager, remember this face. In the future, give him whatever he wants. Yes. The store manager knew that Chairman Chin was here to get back at him. He was glad that he didn't go too far at noon. Otherwise, according to Chairman Chin's style, he wouldn't have let him off so easily. He would have destroyed his store. Chapter 82. Fu Jiu was actually a little surprised. She thought that the digestion the man was talking about was nothing more than racing and enjoying the wind. Now it seemed like Fu Jiu looked up and smiled at Chin Mo. She didn't expect the Almighty to have such a good understanding of his friends. When Chin-mo turned his head, he saw the youngster looking at him. He arched a brow and tugged the back of his collar. Which one do you like? Pick one. Almighty, there's really no one who would like to be carried around by you like this. As Fujio spoke, she adjusted her collar, still looking handsome and naughty. She turned sideways and said with an evil smile, "If you touch me again, I will think that you are secretly in love with me." Chin-mo was no longer someone who would get angry over such words. He patted the back of the youngster's head and smiled coldly. "Shut up and pick your stuff." It was the first time in Fujio's life that someone had slapped the back of her head. She was caught off guard, and her handsome face was buried in her collar. Since he had brought her here to seek revenge, she couldn't fight back. She just thought that for this, she would have to cheat more from the man later. Almighty Chin didn't care about spending money. Seeing the young man cover the back of his head with one hand after he patted him, and with a face full of unwillingness, the corners of Almighty Chin's mouth subconsciously curved upwards, and his mood improved quite a bit. Fujio could tell that Almighty Chin's hobby now was to bully her. To be honest, before she met Almighty Chin, she just thought this man wasn't easy to deal with. After interacting with him, she realized that this man was a black-hearted person. How could normal people find bullying their friends fun? Almighty Chin was the only one in the entire world. With Chin-mo's popularity, he couldn't stay in Computer City for long. Fujio was also looking at the time. She quickly picked out a bunch of internal parts and a very small outer shell. When she said that she only wanted the shell, the store manager looked at her in surprise. Are you sure you want to buy it this way? What could these scattered things do? Why don't you just buy the finished product? Fujio smiled. She had to get a better one so that she could type in class without worry. Chin-mo was sitting next to her with his long legs crossed. He was reading an esports magazine. When he heard this, he lifted his eyes towards Fujio. His eyes were as deep as an ancient lake. They looked calm, but there were many secrets hidden in them. Fujio also noticed that Chin-mo was looking at her. The man already knew that she was a hacker, so there was nothing to hide. She turned her head and smiled at him. "I want to make my own laptop." Chin-mo raised his eyebrows and walked over. His slender fingers picked at the pile of spare parts. His businessman nature didn't change. "The hard drive here won't do. I have one with me. I'll give it to you when you enter the Chin group." In other words, if she didn't enter the Chin group, she wouldn't even be able to think about it. Inexplicably, Fujio understood the hidden meaning in the Almighty's words. "What about these things today? If you don't join the Chin group after the competition, you'll have to refund me the original price." As Chin-mo said this, he threw the bag of stuff into the young man's arms. He put one hand in his trouser pocket and smiled faintly. Seeing this, Fujio raised her eyebrows. What digestion? It was just a trick he came up with to enslave her better in the future. Chapter 83. Forget it, the Almighty wasn't just shameless for a day or two anyway. These pieces of hardware were really great. The main thing was that she had regained her pride. Fujio curled up her lips and took a step forward. She raised her hand and wanted to put it on the man's shoulder to tease him again. Unexpectedly, Chin-mo's reaction was surprisingly fast this time. Before she could put her hand on his shoulder, he grabbed her wrist and turned around to press her against the wall. His breath was cold. "You don't want your claws anymore?" Fujio was still smiling, and her eyes were shining. "Almighty Chin, I realize that your ears are very fragile." There were a lot of group owners watching from the side, and everyone who saw this scene couldn't help but widen their eyes. Especially the store manager, who was watching from the side, was trembling. What the hell was going on? They had never heard of young Master Chin having this kind of taste, silver-haired handsome young man. Did the Chin family know about this? The geeks who were buying equipment were also watching, secretly swallowing their saliva. They really wanted to take pictures but didn't dare to. No one dared to mess with Almighty Chin's power. But that kind of posture really made people think the wrong way. Plus, both of their faces were ridiculously good-looking. Both of them seemed to be exuding hormones all the time, so it was inevitable that people would think in that direction. Fu Jio didn't think much of it, but it was really not good to be pressed against the wall like that. Looking at that handsome face right in front of her, her smile became wider, and she turned her head. Seeing that the young man was going to blow at him again, Chinemo used force again and pressed him back against the wall. The light in the bottom of his eyes released a charming color. Fujo. It was probably because the young man's face was too young and too small. He couldn't bear to do it, so he pinched him hard. But in order to teach the young man a lesson, Chinemo still took action. He leaned over domineeringly, and his thin lips were close to the left ear with the black stud. His warm breath matched with his handsome and unruly side profile, giving people an indescribable feeling of ambiguity. But his voice was cold, and it was heavy on the ear, making people feel numb. Big brother, as an experienced person, let me tell you, don't blow at a man's ear casually in the future, understand? With that, Chinemo straightened his back. He didn't understand how this guy could remain indifferent when he was flirting with someone. It was just that when he saw the porcelain jade-white ear, the round and exquisite earlobe, he actually had an urge to play with it. She must have been angered by this fellow who flirted with her regardless of the situation. Even he was affected by it. However, a certain someone still had an evil smile on her face. She didn't seem to be shocked at all. Her beautiful eyes narrowed. Brother? Chinemo arched a brow and adjusted his tie, looking very restrained. I'm older than you. If I don't call you brother, what should I call you? That was true. But if she took Almighty Chin as her brother, it would be a little stressful. After all, Almighty Chin looked like a profiteer from the beginning. If he tricked her again and made her sign a contract to sell herself or something, Fu Jio raised her eyebrows. The loss outweighed the gain. Seeing that the youngster was still contemplating, Chinemo was instantly infuriated. His voice turned cold. What? Is it wrong for you to call me big brother? Of course not. Fu Jio curled her lips into a smile. But if brother Mo is a brother complex, that would be even better. Chapter 84. 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Before there was a traffic jam, Fu Jio and Chinemo went back to that Michelin restaurant after buying the spare parts. Secretary Liang was already waiting there. He stood at the door in a well-ironed suit, looking at the time from time to time. It wasn't until he saw his CEO's smooth black sports car that he let out a sigh of relief. But the next moment, Secretary Liang's eyes widened. He actually saw someone in the passenger seat of CEO Chin. When Chairman Chin was driving, he rarely let anyone sit next to him. Who was that person? Secretary Liang took another step forward to take a closer look. But in the end, what surprised him was that he had actually seen that person before. Wasn't that the useless young master of the Fu family that Xiao Qin met on his way to school? Secretary Liang couldn't be blamed for calling Fu Jio like that. In fact, as the Fu family's business got bigger and bigger, Fu Jio's reputation got worse and worse. It wasn't the first time that Secretary Liang had heard of Fu Jio's name. In Jiang City, anyone from the upper class would sneer when they saw him. How many nightclubs had set him as a no customer? Especially those elegant places, people would simply shake their heads at the mention of his name. Plus, after what happened this time, it seemed like many people were waiting to see He Honghua and her useless son make a fool out of themselves. Although these weren't the main point, how could Xiao be with such a person? Thinking about the few friends next to the president, almost all of them came from the military compound. They were either politicians or soldiers. Which one of them wasn't a famous person? But this one. Secretary Liang watched his Xiao take the bag from the young man's hand and throw it into the back seat casually. He seemed to be saying, "I'll drive you back later, why are you still taking it?" or something along those lines. Secretary Liang thought that he was either asleep, or there was something wrong with his eyes or ears. Xiao Qin. He called out to Chinemo, but his eyes fell on the young man. As smart as Fu Jio was, of course, she noticed that Secretary Liang was sizing her up. She didn't say anything and just smiled lightly. Her silver hair and black eyes carried a faint air of nobility. Secretary Liang was shocked. When he met young Master Fu in the past, he wasn't like this. Young Master Fu acted like a nouveau riche and didn't know how to restrain himself. Why did he look so elegant today? However, Secretary Liang was a man of action. He wouldn't say things that weren't meant to be said. Instead, he said to Qin Mo respectfully, "CEO Qin, Boss Li and Boss Zhang are already waiting inside. Would your friend first?" "He's going up too," Qin Mo said faintly. Fu Jiu hooked up her lips at him. Secretary Liang watched as the two people walked into the restaurant side by side. He was shocked again. Even though this dinner party was set up by Boss Li and Boss Zhang to curry favor with their boss Boss Qin was not the only one. But, did this young Master Fu have the right to sit at such a table? It wasn't that Secretary Liang looked down on Fu Jiu, he just found it weird. Since when did their CEO become so close to that disgraced young master of the Fu family? This was the biggest contrast in the upper circle of Rivertown. Chapter 85. When Boss Li and Boss Zhang saw a young Master Qin come in with a young man, they were shocked and stood up immediately. "Have a seat." Qin Mo's voice was still light, but it was very effective. He found a seat and let Fu Jiu sit next to him. He loosened his tie, and his side profile was handsome. "Have you ordered?" Boss Li smiled. "Not yet, we are all waiting for you, young Master Qin." As he said this, he glanced at the waiter next to him. The waiter immediately brought up the menu. Secretary Liang took it and put it in front of Qin Mo. Then he looked down at their CEO who was choosing two dishes with a scrutinizing look. Secretary Liang's eyes widened when he saw the word, tripe. Their CEO never ate this kind of food, saying it was dirty and unhygienic. But today, and he even ordered peeing beef meatballs? Who said he didn't eat processed meat? Could it be that all these things were chosen according to that useless young Master Fu's taste? Secretary Liang was shocked by his own horrifying conclusion. No, it can't be like that. He must have been so shocked when he saw Fu Jiu get out of his CEO's car that he thought so much. How could the CEO see if this is enough? If not, you can add more, Qin Mo said as he tilted his head and lit a cigarette. His nobility as the young master of Jiang City was undeniable. Secretary Liang could only feel his ears ringing. The CEO, he really chose according to the youngster's taste. Fu Jiu looked over, and her shoulder brushed against Qin Mo's. They looked at the same menu, and Fu Jiu smiled. "Add a lettuce." Hearing this, Qin Mo picked up a pencil and ticked it casually. When Boss Li and Boss Zhang saw this, they felt that young Master Qin treated this young man differently. They looked at each other immediately and had a plan in mind. "Young Master Qin, this is..." Qin Mo held a cigarette and threw out 3 words with his nose straight. "My little brother." Little brother? When did young Master Qin have a little brother? He had never heard that the Qin family had other sons besides young Master Qin. Secretary Liang was still drinking tea, and he choked and coughed when he heard the words, "my little brother." "CEO Qin, did you ask boss and madam about this?" Qin Mo glanced at him faintly, slowly puffing out a smoke ring. "My brother." Hearing this, Boss Li immediately replied, "Young Master Qin must have something special about him for young Master Qin to recognize him as his godbrother. How should I address this young master, and what does his family do?" "My surname is Fu." Fu Jiu picked up the teacup and smiled faintly. "I haven't been involved in the family business, but I'm planning to take it over." When Mr. Zhang heard the word Fu and looked at him, he suddenly thought of something. Could it be that the Fu family? "I saw your father at the business salon last time. Now, the Fu family's business is getting bigger and bigger. Not bad, not bad." "I heard that young Master Fu is also good at games and has caught the eye of several teams. No wonder Chairman Qin took you as his godbrother. You are all young talents." Oh, I remember too." Not to be outdone, Boss Li also tried to curry favor with him. "Speaking of which, young Master Fu is really different from your elder brother. That young Master Fu is really, When Secretary Liang heard this, he knew that Boss Li had mistaken him for someone else, so he was about to stop him. Chapter 86. I really can't say. President Li shook his head. His taste is far from second young Master Fu's. Even his mother came from the countryside. She is illiterate, but she still wanted to start a company. She didn't think about her own ability, and in the end, she was still tricked by your father. It's one thing to say that this son is a joke, but even his mother is the same. Isn't she just trying to make fun of others? Boss Zhang agreed. I heard that he has some special hobbies. No wonder Boss Fu removed his name from the Fu family. If I had a son like him, I would be very angry. Luckily, Boss Fu still has you, second young Master Fu. Secretary Liang listened to these two and felt that it was over. It was really over. Although their C didn't say anything from the beginning to the end, from the smile on his face and the way he flicked the ash off his cigarette, one could tell that he was exuding an endless coldness. Since Xiao recognized young Master Fu as his younger brother, it meant that he was treating him as one of his own. Fu was always protective of his own people. Who knew what would happen next? Fu Jiao supported her chin with her left hand, looking like a playboy. It seems that Boss Li and Boss Zhang have never seen that illegitimate son, or else they wouldn't have recognized him. What a pity, I am that young Master Fu with special hobbies. Instantly, Mr. Li's and Mr. Zhang's faces changed. The smile at the corner of his mouth stiffened. This was probably the most embarrassing situation they had ever faced in their business. Their faces were burning, and they wanted to find a crack in the ground to hide in. But CEO Qin was still sitting in front of them, and no one could tell whether he was happy or angry from his noble and handsome face. Did this mean that there was still room for negotiation? Thinking of this, Boss Li slapped his forehead. Look at my eyes, I really didn't recognize MT Tai. I will punish myself with a glass of wine, a glass of wine. I heard too much from others before, so I have a prejudice against young Master Fu. This wine must be drunk. Boss Zhang also raised his head and raised his glass. When the two of them drank the wine, they felt a little bitter. No matter how hard they racked their brains, they would never have imagined that young Master Qin would have any connections with a notorious nouveau riche. That was why he subconsciously treated Fu Jiao as the second son of the Fu family. Now, he had been slapped in the face. It was painful. However, Fu Jiao didn't plan on forgiving them. Her previous self was problematic, but He Honghua wasn't a joke. Lord Jiao definitely didn't want to be made fun of like this. Her eyes were cold, and she stood up with a half-smile. She said extremely coldly, Brother Imo, you guys eat first. Just like what these two CEOs said, I don't have good taste and self-restraint. I can't eat this meal or drink this glass of wine in front of people I don't like. Manager Li and Manager Zhang's hands that were about to raise their glasses stopped. They thought to themselves that this temper was giving him face. If it wasn't for young Master Qin, who would have toasted him? If he said that, not only would they lose face, but also young Master Qin's. Even if young Master Qin recognized him as his little brother, did he really treat him as his own? Young Master Qin would let him go wherever he wanted, even if they didn't do anything. Chapter 87. Hearing that, Boss Li and Boss Zhang were dumbfounded. They watched helplessly as young Master Qin stood up himself. He was wearing a well-ironed suit with a black jacket draped over his shoulders. He looked noble and condescending. The man was still holding Fu Jiao in his hand. He glanced at them, and the coldness in his eyes made their hearts tremble. Young Master Qin, about our business today? Boss Li still wanted them to stay. Qin Imo laughed viciously. Do you think I like someone my brother doesn't like? It was just one sentence, but it was enough to make the two of them feel fear. It was as if a freezing chill had drilled into their bones. Young Master Qin, this is all a misunderstanding, young Master Qin. The two of them desperately wanted to explain. They chased all the way from the restaurant to the outside, but they were blocked by the bodyguards in black. They couldn't take another step. The two of them were anxious. They licked their dry lips and looked at Secretary Liang, who was at the back. Secretary Liang, can you help us talk to young Master Qin, or young Master Fu? If he doesn't like us, we can change it. Secretary Liang pushed up his glasses and looked at his CEO's left hand that was holding the young man's wrist. He wondered when his CEO's misophobia was cured, but he still didn't forget to deal with the two in front of him. Boss Li and Boss Zhang, Tio Qin's eyes are sharper than anyone else's. He could tell from your attitudes when you were drinking just now. Let me give you a suggestion. Don't mess around with our CO Qin anymore. He's protective. He even said something like, my brother. It seemed like the CO was serious about protecting that young master of the Fu family. Fortunately, these two stood in front of him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to tell what the CEO meant. Secretary Liang decided that from now on, he would do whatever young Master Fu said. Pissing off young Master Fu was equivalent to pissing off their CO. The consequences were unimaginable. Hearing Secretary Liang's words, Boss Li and Boss Zhang both froze on the spot. Their faces were ashen. The more they cursed in their hearts, the more they regretted it now. If they knew that young Master Qin cared so much about that young master of the Fu family, they wouldn't have looked down on him. Now, they were willing to drink a bottle of wine as an apology. But everyone in Jiang City knew young Master Qin's temper. He wouldn't give them a second chance. This business deal was over. Right now, they were praying that young Master Qin would quickly forget about them. Otherwise, their companies might not be able to continue operating. What did that useless young master of the Fu family do to make young Master Qin protect him like this? It was strange that the two of them knew each other. Young Master Qin really treated him like a little brother. If this news was released, the entire business circle would be shocked. In fact, Fu Jiu didn't expect that Qin Mo would go this far for her. She thought that calling him brother was just a form of address. What are you waiting for? Get in the car. Qin Mo opened the car door casually. His side profile was still handsome and charming. This time, Secretary Liang was driving, and both of them sat in the back seat. Fu Jiu caught Secretary Liang looking at her from the rearview mirror more than once. She winked at him with an evil smile. Secretary Liang's hand slipped, and the car almost went off course. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.